Hospital porters, pride and dignity, stop the New World Order. Welcome to Panwo TV. Well, I'm Oxford Station here, and you can see behind me there. This is the principal station in Oxford, which you're familiar with because I've been to it many times. And I'm going to Swansea. I'm off to see, I'm off to speak at the Swansea UFO Network. And I think there's a big train coming behind me, which is, should we see that in a minute. Yeah, I'm doing my talk, I'm doing my skeptic talk there. Although it's going to be, even if you've seen the talk before, I do recommend you keep watching because it's going to be a bit different this time. I've got some new material. It will be the shorter, more condensed version of the talk, because you know there's like 2 or 3 separate versions of that talk. There's the train. However, this one will be a little bit different. I've got some new points to make, things like that. Anyway, I just thought I'd let you know that I'm on my way. I've got to text the organisers and tell them I'm on my way now. And I am like, the first thing I've got to say is I'm absolutely. Now let me turn around that way so I'm not in silhouette. I'm pretty stunned actually. I went to buy my ticket. Now, as I've said before, I don't like travelling by trains. I don't like the stress of it. I don't like the fact that you don't always get a seat. Trains are very often overcrowded. You don't get such a nice class of people on board trains. Trains either. You tend to get like there's a lot of knobheads on trains. As you know, on coaches they don't allow drinking, but on trains they just can't wait to flog you their overpriced cans of lager and their little miniature bottles of wine and things like that. And you get like drunkards and things like that on trains. The only advantage trains have is they're quicker, which is why I'm using one today. It's I decided to use the train instead of the coach because the coach to Swansea is especially grueling actually, the journey. You go all the way to London and then you have to get another coach to go on the M4 all the way to Swansea. So you have to go in the opposite direction for 2 hours before you even turn west and go where you want to go if you're travelling from Oxford. And it's about 10 hours if I remember rightly, which is it's basically an entire day. I thought no I'm not. I'll bite the bullet and get the train, and so I've done that. However, if I'd known how much it was going to cost, I would have endured the coach. I've just forked out £92 for an off-peak return. A peak must be about 120 or something. 3 figures to get to South Wales. And why? I don't get it. I mean, I went to Swansea just a few months ago. I think it was September I went to Swansea because it was Gareth's funeral. And I'm like, it was about 68 or 70 then. Now it's 92. I'm sure some train spotter will explain this to me about why it's so expensive now and not back then. You know, what day of the week I brought it on, what was the phase of the moon, and all these other things. I mean, rail fares are absolutely Byzantine in complexity. But anyway, there's absolutely no way I'm going to hit there's no way I'm going to hit the organisers for £92. I'll tell them to give me 60 and leave it at that. It's fucking disgraceful. I mean, how can they justify charging that much money? I don't know. Oh dear, dearie me. Anyway, it's done now. That's the last time I'm going by train to Swansea, I'll tell you. That's the last time I ever go by train to Swansea. Fuck that, no way. I'll sit for 10 hours on the coach. I'm not paying 92 bloody quid for this journey. But I didn't realise it was going to cost that much. I mean, it said like the National Rail website actually said it would be like it was like 48 for a single. Well, how come a off-peak return is almost twice that? Is it because I had to buy it on the counter? Is it because I paid with cash? Is it less if you use the Big Brother card, the swipe and monitor and surveillance thing? I don't know. I don't think they do. I don't think they can charge you more if you're just using cash. Anyway, it's sickening, man. It's sickening. Oh well. Anyway, I can't get on this train. This train is going where I want to go. It's going to Reading, where I have to change. But I've got an off-peak ticket, so I can't go after after 10 o'clock. And This one is just before 10. It's 1 minute before 10. So, was it 9:30? I can't remember. Anyway, I don't care. I'm not getting on this train now. I'm too busy filming. Let me just show you more of where I'm going today. And this is where I'm going. It's my 5th appearance at the Swansea UFO Network. And here's the details here. 7:45 PM, New Lodge, Alexandra Road, got a train on Swansea. Free admission, but donations are welcome. Details there, you see, at the website, which you can click at any time. And my lecture is going to be entitled Skeptics. Who are they? Why are they wrong? And why does it matter? Benjamin Jones asks some searching questions about those who challenge. All people who look into UFOs and similar matters will at some point come across the skeptics. People who dismiss and deny everything that's been discovered. Yet, tonight, Ben puts them under examination. Now, I should point out that I have done this talk before. And you've probably seen it on several times now on other videos if you're a regular viewer. But please do watch this one because it's a bit different. I've got some new information I haven't included on previous versions of this talk. There's also a wonderful atmosphere at SUFON, so I want to share that with you too. And we're off. I'm at Reading now, this super modern station which you might recognise from it from my Newbury video. Looks like something from Logan's Run, of course. I tell you what, I think I've been leading a very sheltered life. Everything's changed. Everything has changed since I last took the train. Every single announcement is it's all about health and safety. You know, take care when stepping down from the train. Don't take large items of luggage on the escalator, and all these other things which, you know, Steve Hughes, the Australian comedian, he said it's all common sense, mate. You know, you see a hole in the road, you walk round it. Someone looked at me and said, "How did you manage to do that?" I said, "My mum and dad brought me up not to be a fool." So it's like. I've got to find my way to platform 9 now. It's huge, there's like 15 platforms on here. Oh dear, platform 1 to 9. There we go. But I've got plenty of time anyway. The train's on time so far. But it's like, you can almost feel the tension in the air. There's all kinds of notices about, there's notices here, there and everywhere about coronavirus. Even though, you know, the whole thing's fading away now, as you know. So that's platform 10. See if I'll find my way around. Follow this. I also like. I'm feeling a bit slack. So like at the moment, you know, complaining about these sorts of things. That's platform 1 to 7. Oh, so where's 8 and 9? Oh, there's 8 and there's 9. All right. We had like a freaking. The escalator's not working. Oh, I can. You just can't go up. You can go down, but not up. All right then. I went into. I don't know. This is a minor complaint, you know. This is Reading. That's the London Underground's in a bit of a state of there's a strike going on. I think the train drivers and the other staff on the train don't feel happy about being replaced by robots. I think we're all gonna try and replace us all with robots soon. But platform 8, platform 9, all right then. But it's like, oh yeah, I went into the H. Smith. There's another one here. I might go in and see it. I'll try again. All I wanted to get a little tube of hand cream, you know, like moisturiser, because I suffer from dry skin. I used to get eczema quite badly. So I went in there. They had shampoo, they had conditioner, they had shower gel, and every other thing. This was on like Oxford Station. This was the H. Smith on Oxford Station, right? They had everything that you would need, all the toiletries imaginable, but they didn't have hand cream. This is a shop on a bleeding railway station, right? What's the thing people are most likely going to want when they're on the train? Shower gel, conditioner, you know, hair remover. I mean, for goodness sake, is there a wet room on trains these days? No, they're going to want simple things. Maybe toothbrush and toothpaste, moisturiser, things they're going to need on the journey. I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it? Again, this is something I bought quite easily from the same shop on Oxford Station a couple of months ago, and now I can't find it. I'll have another go anyway.
May I have your...
Well, I got on the train at Reading. I couldn't find the moisturiser in that WH Smith either. What you do have in these railway station shops, you have your pick of different brands of hand sanitizer. There's about 70 different types. Which do you prefer? Why should there be more than one? Anyway, I've got the rest of the journey ahead of me, the longest stage. Should be in Swansea about 2:30. I've got Nexus magazine to help me pass the time. The hours turn into minutes when you're reading Nexus. It's a bit like murky up there. It's like there's no sunshine. It's quite chilly as well. But at least it's not raining and it's not windy. It's bad weather tends to keep people away from meetings like the one I'm going to. As long as it's not raining and it's not windy, they will go. I remember the first time I spoke at SUFON, it was blowing a gale and we were in like a marquee. I don't know if you've seen the video of that. But anyway, I was just engrossed in my article in Nexus about crop circles of 2021 by Andy Thomas. And an announcement has just come through that a train's arriving at 13:33 p.m. Not 14:33, 2:33 p.m. So I'm actually arriving an hour earlier than I thought I was. I'll have to let Emlyn know, and you know, if necessary, I might have to wait for him. I suppose it's better to be an hour early than an hour late. Anyway, we're making steady progress. No delays yet. I'm going through the box tunnel right now on this train. You see the walls out there. I just want the crafty nihilists to know that I'm travelling right underneath their feet at the moment, so I wonder if they'll sense my presence like they did last time. It's a long tunnel. Not as long as the 7 tunnel though, which is coming up later on. We're in the 7 tunnel, goes underneath the sea. It's called the Bristol Channel, but I mean, I first in Wales it's called the Severn Sea. That's what the Welsh call it. It seems strange to name a stretch of water after an inland English city. The road, as you remember, going on the coach, if you watched previous videos, goes over a big bridge, but the railway goes in a tunnel under the sea. It's like the Channel Tunnel, only a bit smaller, but it's like we are going under like the river estuary. It takes a good few minutes to get through it. You can see the outside there. Think of all that water above our heads. Hope it doesn't spring a leak. side. We're in Wales. We come out in Wales. Croeso I Gymru. Croeso I Gymru, it says welcome to Wales. Oh, that's, we're making good progress. We'll be there soon. That's a very Welsh view. It's raining slightly and it's very hilly. You can see the, those big hills are there in the distance. Now, it's all a bit poignant and it brings back memories because just a few months ago in September I came to Swansea, but I didn't film it, I didn't write anything about it because it was Gareth Davis's funeral. Well, he had his actual funeral where he was put in a coffin in Los Angeles, USA, where he lived, but his family, who couldn't get there because of the lockdown, decided to have a memorial service here in Swansea, which I attended. I met his mum and his brother. I'd already met his brother before, and all his friends and family, and a lot of other people from the Mindset podcast. Look at that castle there, it's good, isn't it? A lot of people from the Mindset podcast, and we got together. We had a little bit of a wake in one of the pubs. Gone, but Gareth Davis gone, but never forgotten. And if you enjoy the Mindset podcast, then I think all of them are now available. I mean, I think we've managed to dig up every single episode, so you can go through all 500 of them that he did, including about 150 which had me in. So I've got to meet up with Emlyn of SUFON as soon as I get there. He's waiting for me. So and then the fun will begin. It'll be fun, but it'll be hard work for me as well. But I'm looking forward to it. Well, I've arrived. I'm in Swansea, and I'm here in India, which is nice. I've been eating food here. I finished mine, but I'm here with Emily, who you remember from the last video, and this is Julianne, who you may remember from the Probe video. Hi. It's great you're here, guys. It's great to be with you. Yeah.
Lovely to see you again.
Yes.
You
too, likewise. And it's been a long journey, but I've arrived, and so I'm just having something to eat, and then I've got to prepare myself for everything I've got to do later, which is I'm looking forward to. It should be fun. So we'll see you both at later on at the event.
Yes,
We will.
Take care.
Okay.
Hello there. Yes, this is my hotel room. It's time for another classic Panwo TV hotel room tour. So let's have a look over here. I've got my phone there, and lots of other things that are underneath my bags. There's a little settee. I think that can double up as a bed. I think it's designed to look like a bed. There's my bed. TV. Flower pictures. And then here's the bathroom with your standard, you know what. I don't know if it's worth doing these sort of tours because all these rooms are sort of much the same. This is actually the Premier Inn, not Travelodge, but still, you know, they're pretty ubiquitous. And of course, the Psycho shower, as always, and your standard cheap hotel soap dispenser, towels, etc. I've got what's in here. Let's have a look. I've got on this door. I've not looked. Oh, nice. There's a locked door to my room. I wonder what's behind that. Is that where the weird people come in, take your blood in the middle of the night, come out? Oh, I don't know. Or is that an adjoining room in there? I wonder who's in there. Oh. If it's someone nice looking, you know, I wouldn't mind going in and saying hello to her. Although it's I think they probably just, if that's an adjoining room, they just maybe can open it up to make a giant room for families and things like that. Anyway, here's my little room. There are lots of mirrors all over the place. Fire procedures in foreign languages. That's French, that's German. Nothing in Welsh though. That's bad, isn't it? Anyway, let's have a look through. Let's have a look at the view from my window. I'm on the second floor, so shouldn't be bad. And it's scaffolding. And there's a lovely sunset over Swansea, which you can't miss because the scaffolding's in the way. You know, oh well. Should be handy if I have to escape in the fire. Oh, excuse me. Okay, it's about 6 PM now. I'm going to have a cup of tea, then get ready to go to the meeting.
Right, good evening. Can everybody hear all right? Hello? Can everyone hear me all right? Excellent, great. I haven't set the loudspeakers and mic system up tonight because Ben here's got a great Welsh loud voice, used to singing and shouting, so... There we are. Well, a warm welcome back to everybody and a warm welcome to our newcomers. Thank you very much, you know who you are. It's nice to get back to some sort of normality, isn't it? So I'm sorry we're in here tonight, but hopefully we're hoping that we're going to get back to a first Tuesday of the month again, back in the big hall opposite, so there'll be plenty of room, as you know, in there. Okay? But we should be able to let you know by the end of the night whether we can or whether we can't. Now, as usual, if anyone's had any unusual sightings you want to share, we'll speak to Emily or myself during the interval and we'll make a note of them, okay? As you know, there's no admission charge or anything, but there's a little box at the exit there if you want to put something in the donations at the end of the night. It's totally up to you. It's a matter for yourselves. Right, tonight we got the pleasure to welcome back our guest speaker, Mr. Ben Emlyn-Jones here. I'm sure most of you probably know him. A little bit about him. Ben was born in Aberystwyth, brought up in the Lampeter area before moving to Oxford. Where up until about, I think it was about 9 years ago now, he was working as a hospital porter in John Radcliffe Hospital in Oxford, and he spent 22 well-respected years there. He became interested in UFOs and various other conspiracy theories in the 1990s, the late 1990s, and he started his website blog, and I'll have to read this, Hospital Porters Against the New World Order, in 2006, and he still has thousands of visitors every day. Now he regularly attends and delivers talks and discussions all over Britain on a wide range of subjects, including UFOs, as you know. This actually is Ben's 5th visit to us. Yeah, I'd lost count. I was having a look, and you first addressed us in January 2016, and that was about energy, politics, and UFOs. Then in July 2016, which was just 5 months later, he was so popular, see? He spoke about the history of exopolitics. February 2018, he gave us a talk on the Nottinghamshire Roswell. And last year, in July 2019, talking about SETI. Well, I'm sure most of you know what SETI is, and UFOs. Now, tonight's talk is entitled Skeptics. Who are they? Why are they wrong? And why does it matter? And Ben's going to be asking some searching questions about those who challenge those who challenge, if that makes sense. Right, so all people who look into UFOs and similar matters will at some point come across the skeptics. I know Emlyn and I have sort of bumped into loads over the years. And people who dismiss them and deny everything that's been discovered. So tonight, Ben's going to put them under examination, then, if you like, okay? So I'm not going to go on and on, so please give a warm SUFON welcome to Mr. Ben Emlyn-Jones. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, all of you. It's really, really great to be back again. Thank you, all of you, for coming out tonight. It's been a long wandering in the desert for you guys in terms of lockdowns. In England, we've been out of lockdown for quite a long time. For you, I think it was a couple of days ago, wasn't it? It all ended. So, there's still a few rules you've got to obey, things like that. So, this is a kind of like call this a freedom party, as well as the Swansea UFO Network. So you're making the most of it by coming out and enjoying it. That's really, really good. It's been I didn't realise it's 5 times I've been here. I've lost count. That's really amazing. I mean, the first time I was here, we were in a marquee, and it was windy, and I did my talk, and then it was like in a big tent, and the walls were like wobbling. And I think with the wind, it was hilarious. But we did all right. We managed all right. It's tonight. I'm going to talk about the skeptics. Any skeptics here tonight? Good. Oh, Steve, you don't count. You don't count. Well, you may think, well, I'm a skeptic because I don't believe in certain things. And, well, that technically is what a skeptic means. But it's a bit more complicated than that, as I'll explain. So what is a skeptic? I mean, everyone, as you've just explained, Steve, has skeptics in our lives. If you start speaking out about the things you believe, and I'm guessing that most, if not all, people in this room have some kind of belief in UFOs and maybe other similar phenomena, such as ghosts, government cover-ups of various kinds. These things tend to go together. The skeptic researcher Michael Barkin called it the cultic milieu. So I assume most people in here are members of the cultic milieu. And it's a good thing to be, I think. But if you are one of these people, then at some point you're going to bump into somebody who will say, you know, this stuff you believe in is not true. It's not real. They'll sometimes come up with, they can be very, very sort of verbose and eloquent, and come up with and can be very persuasive when they're talking to you, and can try to explain to you why what you believe is not true. And this could be, oops, come on. So I've got to do that every so often. So I just got to do that every so often so that the computer doesn't go off. This could be a friend, it could be a work colleague, it could be a member of your family, it could even be your partner. I know there's people like us who are married to skeptics. It could be anyone you meet. It could just be someone you meet on an off chance. But they're everywhere. And when you get caught in a corner by these people, it can be a strange experience. It can sometimes feel intimidating. Most of them are quite polite. You know, most of them are not aggressive. Some are, and I'll be talking about some of those this evening. Most of them, you know, will just get there and they'll get in your face and they'll say, it's not true, it's not true, this is swamp gas, this is a weather balloon, and here's why. And they tend to have very good memories, and they tend to be able to, they tend to have a lot of interesting arguments, interesting information tucked up in their brains to give to you. And, well, it gets more, if you can be like them and understand them, it becomes a more interesting conversation, rather than being bamboozled by them. So it's worth examining the skeptics, looking at them and seeing what makes them tick. I wouldn't mind becoming a skeptic for a day, just to see what it's like. Although, I don't know, I might end up enjoying it and not wanting to come back. And you'd lose all faith in me, wouldn't you? But in order to research the skeptic side of things, I've looked at skeptics. You know this guy, Mick West? You've probably come across him. He's the big UFO skeptic now. And so I've watched all of his material. It's very interesting to listen to him, actually. And I've done what very, very few people on our side of the argument, very, very few people have done this. I've immersed myself within the skeptic community to examine them the way they examine us. Sometimes I've done this very quietly. I've gone along to their various meetings. I've not introduced myself or told them who I am. It used to be easier. Now I'm getting a bit more sort of famous, so they sort of flock around me and want my autograph and things like this. You know. But they sometimes recognise me and come over and say, "Oh, I know you. You're that weird bloke who does the hospital porter thing." I said, "Yeah." But I do sometimes go anonymously to their meetings, and I talk to them just neutrally without telling them who I am. Other times people even know who I am, or I tell them who I am, in which case I've never had any problems. I've never had any, no one's ever sort of shown me the door or made me feel unwelcome at any time. They've always been very, very accommodating of me. So, but I've gone to various events. You can see on the top left there, that is actually, if the focus is slightly out, but you can see that's actually a skeptic conference. That's actually I think that's one of the Honestly Amazing meetings. They have conferences just like we do. It's strange. It's almost like a kind of parallel world. They have all the things that we have. They have the equivalent of SUFON, which is various local groups that meet together, usually part of the Skeptics and the pub franchise. They have big conferences just like you know, the UFO conventions and things like that. There's like TAM London. There's QED-Con. There's the Skepticon, and mostly in the United States, just like with the UFO movement. It's mostly Americans that do this, but you get them all over the world. QED is actually a British conference you can go to. And there's films, there's An Honest Liar, that's a documentary. about a famous skeptic, and I've watched that. I actually went to the premiere of that. They had a big screen premiere here in Britain. I went to watch that. Paranormality is a book by Professor Richard Wiseman. It's a very interesting thing here. It's called Why We See What Isn't There. That's in a very provocative title. Anyway, I wrote a long review of that, and for a while it was actually on the Google rankings above the publisher's own page, which must have delighted the author. Bad Science by Ben Goldtaker, that's another one. You may have heard of Ben Goldtaker. He's got a column in The Guardian. In fact, all these major skeptics seem to have columns in The Guardian. It sort of goes with the territory. That's a book about what he sees as medical pseudoscience. He's been very quiet the last couple of years for some reason. Interesting to think about why that is. The local skeptics groups, and they're called Skeptics in a Pub, most of them, although there are some that have different names. But a Skeptic in a Pub group is basically a group of skeptics who get together in a pub, a bit like what we're doing now. We have a drink. Very often they invite a speaker. Sometimes they just exchange ideas, and these are all organised independently in local areas. People come up, they give a few pounds for donations, and they make friends, and they network, and it means they can connect with their fellow skeptics in the local area. Again, it's a parallel sort of mirror universe to our own almost. There are over 300 skeptics in a pub in the world, actually, including I think about 150 here in Britain. I'm actually a member of Oxford Skeptics in a Pub. I say member, I'm just on their mailing list, you know. So I go along regularly to their meetings. There is actually a Cardiff Skeptics in a Pub, and there's one in Aberystwyth. There's not one in Swansea for some reason. Yeah, I don't know why there's not one in Swansea, because nearly most major cities actually in the country have a Skeptics in a Pub, and there's also plenty in the United States, there's some in Australia. Southeast Asia has a lot of them. There's a couple in India. They're common worldwide. And honestly, if you want to go along to one of these, it's worth doing. It's an interesting experience. I've started going to the ones in London. There's 4 separate Skeptics in the Pub in London. I've been to 2 of those. No, 3. I've been to 3 of the 4. And it's like I said, I went along. I didn't introduce myself at first. Now they sort of know who I am, because my notoriety is spread. But they'll make you welcome. It actually says on the Skeptics in a Pub website, it says non-skeptics are welcome. If anyone wants to set up a Skeptics in a Pub group, I'm talking generally now, not you guys here, but you could just set one up, and you don't need to join. You don't need to sign any paperwork. I don't think there's any copyright on the franchise. You just say you're a Skeptics in a Pub, and then you can list yourself on the World Network, and that's all there is to it, really. It's all very, very informal. Now, I think probably the greatest accolade, the yardstick of achievement within the skeptic movement is to become a skeptic rock star. And they do use the term rock star. That is to become the top skeptic in the land. And to be the person who is on speed dial for every journalist whenever they want to do a story about something weird, a ghost, a haunting, a UFO, something else like that. You know those news stories where they always play the X-Files music in the background? Yeah, those. They're usually not very good. But you obviously interview one of us probably. I know that you guys in this group are often in the media. You do a lot of work with journalists. They'll bring on a skeptic just to provide balance. And there's several of these, I suppose you call them pop skeptics. And probably the biggest one in this country, at least it used to be until recently, was Professor Chris French. And here we see him here on the programme this morning debating Gary Heseltine. If you want to watch this on YouTube, it's there. I think Gary gets the better of him, but Professor Chris French is he's the head of the anomalistic psychology department at Goldsmiths College London. Now, it's anomalistic psychology. It's an interesting they have these names, and he's actually quite a likeable chap. He's one of these skeptics. Like I said, I don't have a problem with the skeptics for their beliefs. If they behave themselves in a civilized manner, I don't mind them at all. There are those that don't behave in a civilized manner. I'll just talk a little bit about those. But French actually, he organised a conference a couple of years ago called Seriously Suspicious, and he invited me to speak. And he was quite. I said, yeah, sure, Chris, I'll come along to that. And I did an interesting talk about the medium Helen Duncan, and it was great fun. Everyone had a really good time. So the rock star of skepticism, Chris French, he's the guy you have. He's the guy you used to have on speed dial. If you were a journalist and you wanted, you call him up French, he'd come, wheel him into the studio, put the skeptic side across, so we have balance on this news story. But he's now retired. But he does have a young apprentice waiting in the wings. And later on in this talk, I'll tell you who I think that young apprentice is. And the young apprentice is actually a very, very different character to Frenchie. So what is a skeptic? Now, it's actually a more difficult question to answer than you think, because, I mean, I would say a skeptic is that person. He's the person who will approach you when you start talking about your beliefs and say these things are not real. However, there's a little bit of an anomaly here. For example, you may ask yourself, well, supposing you could say, well, the skeptic is the guy who questions things. The skeptic is the guy who's looked into something and says this is not wrong. So this is not real. What you believe in, if it's a UFO, if it's a ghost or a poltergeist or something, it's not real. And they're the person who comes along and pours cold water on anything that's weird and strange and spooky. Now, they will deny that, though. They will deny that. Now, I think the best place to start is to read a description of themselves, what they call themselves. Now, this is something I lifted from the Oxford Skeptics in the Pub webpage. A skeptic is one who rigorously and openly applies the methods of science and reason to all empirical claims. Can you all hear me all right?
Yeah.
You can? Okay.
Yeah.
A skeptic provisionally proportions acceptance of any claim to valid logic and a fair and thorough assessment of available evidence, and studies the pitfalls of human reason and the mechanisms of deception so as to avoid being deceived by others or themselves. That is the definitions, their own definition of themselves, a skeptic. But I'm going to argue tonight, ladies and gentlemen, this is not a definition of what a skeptic is. This is a slogan. This is a projection, this is a facade. It's a persona that the skeptics believe that they are. But then they are actually not. The weird thing is that most of them don't realise this. Most of them actually don't even understand themselves. And sometimes you might think that's a bit arrogant of me. I've never been a skeptic. I might become one day. You never know. I mean, you've always got to leave the possibility open that one day, something will come along that will change my mind. I might have a sudden change of mind internally, which will turn me into a skeptic. But it's unlikely, actually, because I have looked at both sides of this. The people who tend to become skeptics are those who haven't. But what you see, I define a skeptic as the one who believes that everything outside normal reality, within known systems of the universe, is not real. Someone who believes that and promotes that idea. I think that's a more accurate description of what a skeptic is. To give you an example, supposing someone came to you, or someone approached somebody saying, I've seen a UFO, I've got a photograph of it, and they show you the photo. Right, and there are two skeptics there who look at it. One of them looks at it and says, oh, that's interesting, tell me more. And they interview the witness, they go to the location where this happened, they phone around and looked at, and they call all the local areas to see if there were any balloons launched and things like that, any strange drone festivals or anything like that. And then they come back to the witness and they say, I've looked into this, I'm sorry, this is not a UFO, this is a weather balloon, swamp gas, stroke, drone, whatever. Okay. And then the second skeptic, the witness goes up, shows them the photograph, the second skeptic goes, that's not real, I'm not even going to look at it or examine it, it's not real, it's not a UFO. Now, of those two skeptics, the latter one is considered the best and biggest skeptic. The one who says, I'm not even going to look at it, it's not real. So that doesn't fit in with that definition, does it? Because, I mean, I don't actually disagree with anything within that slogan. I really don't. Now, if you're ever in these... I'm going to give you a few instructions about what you may be able to do if you ever are trapped with one of these people and and they're saying things to you and about what you believe, and you want to defend yourself or successfully rebut their rebuttal, because they use a few tricks. There's a few I would say rhetorical tactics that they use which in a sense bamboozles you. It's essentially it's a kind of sophistry they use. I'm going to go through a couple of those now. Now, one of those is this one: raising the bar. Demand evidence from your opponent for everything he says, and when he delivers, demand more, and when he delivers more, demand even more. Remember, your thirst for evidence must be unquenchable. Give you a good example, or a hypothetical example. A guy's walking his dog in the wood late at night outside a military base. A triangular object descends into the forest. It leaves marks on the ground. Little aliens come out and start dancing around it. The guy runs home, tells the newspapers, tells everyone, calls the police, calls everyone, and eventually ends up in the news. Now, what would a skeptic say? The skeptic would say, "I don't believe you. There's not enough evidence for this. We just got your word for it. There was no alert at the base. The security guards at the base didn't come out and examine the location. None of the security police saw it. The deputy base commander didn't come out into the forest. He didn't make any kind of recording on his dictaphone. So if that happened, I would believe you. But until then, I'm afraid there's just not enough evidence." What have I just described? I've described the Rendlesham Forest incident. So, in a sense, the skeptic has set a finish line which you can cross, supposing in that statement. Because they do say things like that, which once you've crossed it, they can say, well, if that happened, I'd believe you. But when you fulfill that, when you fulfill that criteria, when you cross that finish line, when you tick those boxes on the form, what do they say? Okay, I believe you now. But they don't, do they? They say, no, hang on, no. It could have been a lighthouse. It could have been a truckload of burning manure. What a pile of manure that is. Or it could have been a joyriding ice cream van. That's got to be my favourite. See, it could be all those things. So I'm afraid it's not a UFO. I think this is what it was instead. So that's raising the bar. Sock 'em with the Occam. So Occam's razor. All things being equal, the most likely explanation is usually the right one. Now, you may have heard this quoted on the film Contact. That's an interesting film, which I discussed the last time I was here. But Occam's razor is a problem-solving exercise, it's actually a very good problem-solving exercise for known systems. So, for example, if your portable radio breaks down, before you open it and stick a screwdriver in and start fiddling with it, try changing the batteries first. Because your flat batteries are probably the most likely problem which will cause a radio to malfunction. Once you've done that, if it doesn't work, then you can stick your screwdriver in and start fiddling with it. But until then, you'll go for the most likely explanation first. Now, what they'll say, the problem is you can't apply that to unknown systems. So, for example, if you could say, well, which is more likely regarding Rendlesham Forest, coming back to this metaphor again? Was it a lighthouse or was it aliens from the planet Zog? Which is more likely? And you could say, I don't. The answer to that would be, well, I don't actually know how often aliens from the planet Zog actually land and interact with people. I don't know is it more likely that it was aliens from the planet Zog landing, or is it more likely that a group of highly trained US Air Force security police saw a light flashing through the trees, coming from a well-known local landmark, and thought it was a triangular object with aliens floating around it? So it's a good thing when you get here. So whenever you're challenged with Occam's razor, always turn it back on them and saying, well, okay, you're dealing with an unknown system and you're trying to assign a hierarchy of likelihoods within that unknown system, and you can't do that. You can only do it with known systems where we know the likelihood of different outcomes as an explanation. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary explanations. Now, whenever you... This is an interesting thing. Firstly, if a skeptic ever says this to you, right, can you do us a favour, right, just for my amusement, if for no other reason. Reply to them, oh, that's interesting, that's a good phrase, I'll remember that. Oh, I thought of another. It's good to be open-minded, but not so open-minded that your brain falls out. Yeah. The reason is that both of these are skeptic cliches, and skeptics use them all the time. They have, they like old jokes. Neil deGrasse Tyson, who was he's the current presenter of the Cosmos series after Carl Sagan died, he did the second series. He was at a skeptic conference and he made that statement, it's good to be open-minded but not so open-minded your brain falls out. And the audience still laughed. Unbelievable. I wish if I tell a joke more than 2 or 3 times, people go, oh, you know. But if you're a skeptic and you tell the joke over and over again, people still laugh. Hello. Hiya.
Oh, sorry, I'm just...
Oh, right, no. I'll have time for questions at the end. All right. Now, the thing is, this has been attributed to Carl Sagan, the guy who presented Cosmos. He was also a big proponent of SETI, as you knew if you were here from my last appearance. And he coined this phrase, extraordinary claims require extraordinary explanations. Well, there's a problem with this particular statement. One is that it's simply a qualitative, emotional kind of reaction to something. So, for example, you present a claim. Okay, you present a claim, an extraordinary claim. Well, what kind of... How do you apply a quantity to that? In other words, could you create a scale and say this has 5 extraordinary points, this claim? So then you need an explanation with more than 5 extraordinary points. So it's got to be 5 or above extraordinary points. You get a tape measure and there's a tape. That's 5 extraordinary points, 10 extraordinary points. Hold a tape measure up to it, weigh it on a scale, which gives you how many extraordinary points it has. You can't do that because the word extraordinary doesn't apply to any kind of quantity. It's simply a statement of your... Extraordinary essentially is how people react subjectively to a phenomenon. And there's no way to measure that because only you know how extraordinary you find something, no one else. So when someone says extraordinary claims require extraordinary explanations, say, well, I think evidence should be adequate to explain the claim, and if it does, then that's, as far as I'm concerned, the claim has been proved. But just saying it's extraordinary doesn't really add or subtract anything from the conversation. The Santa Claus gambit. Maybe skeptics can't rule out the existence of the Loch Ness Monster, but we can't rule out the existence of Santa Claus either. Does that mean that Santa Claus is therefore real? Now, this is a slight adaptation on a more general point, which is this, the burden of evidence. Skeptics are not making the claims. The onus is on the believer to provide evidence that their claim is true, not on the skeptic for proving that it is not. The onus. That's a weird... I never heard the word onus until I heard it from a skeptic in this particular statement. I've never heard it since from anyone else. Onus seems to be one of these words that the skeptics love. And it's one of their little... I suppose it's one of their habit words. They do have a few habit words. Onus is one of them. Another is caveat. Skeptics love the word caveat. If you listen to them for like more than half an hour, I actually guarantee they will say the word caveat at some point. But this is actually a misrepresentation of us. I think what they're trying to say is that people who are not skeptics use this fallacy. They say, well, I was walking along the shores of Loch Ness and I saw a monster, and therefore it's real because you can't prove I didn't. I've never met a serious Nessie researcher or ufologists, a ghost hunter or anyone else who actually believes that, who actually believes that they just have to say something and everyone's supposed to believe them because it can't be falsified. I've never ever suggested that that's the case myself. I don't know any serious researcher who thinks that that's the case either. So if a skeptic is using this in a sense as a description of most people who are not skeptics, then it's a false description, and they do this a lot. They tend to strawman us quite a bit. Casting doubt. 9/11 truthers got it wrong about Page Stewart's jet because they forgot to take into account that it crossed into different time zones. Let's talk about that for a while. The Page Stewart's jet refers to the golfer Page Stewart, who had a private jet. This jet actually lost its cabin pressure and everyone on board suffocated while it was in the air, including the pilot. And it took a while it apparently took 2 hours for the the air defences to find them when the people often say, well, actually, you know, why did it take that long for 9/11? But it apparently took a much shorter time in this case than it did for 9/11. But the point is that this was actually a mistake. The response time was the same for both this jet and for the 9/11 incident. Yet the skeptics point out that this is something the researchers got wrong. So that means all the other scholarship related to the subject of 9/11 and why the official story should be questioned is therefore thrown out the window because they made one mistake. That's called casting down. Now, this is the ultimate in casting down the sneer. This is an extension of casting doubt to the levels of absurdity. Anyone who believes we've been visited by extraterrestrial aliens must be a lunatic, a fool, or a con man. If you believe this, you must be a maniac, a simpleton, or a fraud. Now, I told you, not all skeptics are civilized, and some will say things like this, but leaving aside the insulting nature of what they're saying, what does this tell us about the existence of aliens? It tells us nothing. This is worthless as an axiom in every single way. I could adapt it and say everyone who thinks 2 + 2 is 4. Everyone who thinks 2 + 2 = 4 is a maniac, a lunatic, and a fool, or a simpleton and a fraud. Does that mean 2 + 2 = 5? No. But they will say this. This is called an ad hominem attack. It's also poisoning the well fallacy. I think the ultimate expression of this, going back to 9/11 again, the ultimate expression is, I think, is an example which a lot of people, when people question the official story of 9/11, you'll often get this. They'll say, "You think the Jews were phoned up the night before and told to stay off work, don't you?" And Richard Dawkins, I'll talk a bit more about him in a minute. Now he's like a famous atheist skeptic. He did a program called Enemies of Reason, and he addresses the conspiracy angle only once in the entire series, and he brings up this point. He said, "You may think that conspiracy theories are harmless, but what about all the people who say that the Jews were phoned up the day before 9/11 and told to stay off work?" That's the only reference he makes to that entire subject. As it happens, over 300 Jews died on 9/11, including 6 Israelis, and I don't know anyone who seriously doubts that. I mean, it's a bit unlikely, isn't it? Can you imagine it? Hello? Ishmael, is that you? Yeah, who is this? It doesn't matter. Listen, someone's going to go down. Don't go into work tomorrow. Who are? It doesn't matter. Just don't go into work tomorrow. No, they say this because they want to... It is an attack against our character. That's what it is. They want us to be wrong, but they can't prove us wrong, so they say, well, you're a bad person. Therefore, I don't have to prove you wrong. It's a very nasty thing, and they do this a lot. In the longer version of this talk, I go into more details about the skeptic thug element, which does exist, and I've been the target of them myself. I had to call the police at one point. Coincidence theory. It's just a coincidence, you know. Who's had this one? It's just a coincidence. I'm surprised no one's had this one from a skeptic. It's a very, very common method. You say something like that, and they'll say, "Oh, it's just a coincidence." Right, well, this is an important point. The problem with the coincidence, when they say it's just a coincidence, that's kind of a get-out-of-jail-free card. It's actually intellectually lazy and dishonest for them to say that. Because, you see, there is nothing physically possible in this universe which is so unlikely that you could say that can never happen. It just cannot happen because it's too unlikely. It could happen. And the skeptics take this ball and they run with it to the point where they come up with all kinds of ways of making out that something which is highly unlikely to be coincidental is a coincidence. There's all kinds of... when it comes to synchronicity, for example, people who have synchronistic experiences, like you're thinking about someone you haven't seen for years and years and years, and suddenly you meet them the very next moment, they sort of come around the corner. Have you had that? It's very common. Synchronicity is very common. I get a lot of that. Professor Gary Schwartz was doing a talk the other day about it, which I listened to. It was very interesting. The problem is, you see, I got into a debate with a guy called Dr. Paul Rogers about this when I was at a conference in Bath, many years ago now. And I said to him, Okay, if someone comes up to you and if someone wins the national lottery 5 weeks in a row, would you accept that as coincidence? And he said, no, of course not. And I said, why not? It's physically possible. Why not? It's incredibly unlikely. I mean, the odds are 13 million to 1 raised to the power of 5. And that's such a huge number, it's impossible to imagine. It's that unlikely. But if you buy a ticket 5 weeks in a row, it's physically possible for you to win 5 weeks in a row. And he said, no, that's not possible. It's not possible that that could happen. I said, right. Where is the statistical ceiling then for you above which you will stop using that trump card? You will stop saying things are coincidence. Where is it? Where is the cut-off point between what you, in terms of the hierarchy of likelihood, in which you will say it is a coincidence, it could be a coincidence if it's below that, but it could be a coincidence if it's above that. And he couldn't answer me, because the skeptics have never actually had any kind of conference and agreed on it. And they mumble things about p-values and Bayesian inference and things like that, but they cannot answer that simple question. Until they can answer that simple question, they cannot use this. They cannot use this as a rebuttal and not as a successful rebuttal, because you know it's because it can be used so randomly and so gratuitously in that way. So, and he did. I think hopefully I gave him something to think about there. But if you did win, I mean, obviously, I think if someone won the lottery 5 weeks in a row, you'd probably be arrested and questioned, wouldn't you? Because you could go to court. Obviously, you could afford a very good lawyer, so you could get out of it quite easily. Yeah. But you could go to court and you could just stand up and say, when it comes to the defence, you could stand up and say, Your Honour, I'm just a very lucky guy, and sit down again. And they'd have to acquit you. They'd have to acquit you. If there's no evidence you've been tampering with Lancelot's innards or weighting the balls or anything. You know? Rational explanations. I'm sure there's a rational explanation for this. Now, this isn't really a criticism, but this is just like... now, it's not just skeptics who use this. Steve Mera has a habit of using this phrase. And I do mention to it sometimes. I've interviewed him a few times, and I've said, Steve, look, can I be very pedantic? And I take him up on this. Now, the thing about this, what do they mean when they say there's a rational explanation? Because rational, I don't believe the adjective rational cannot be used to apply to an explanation. It can't be used to apply to a conclusion, only to a method. So it's like you could say, well, I examined this particular case rationally and I concluded that it is really aliens, these UFOs really are aliens, therefore I've used rationality and I've come to an irrational conclusion. You know, alternatively, you could be a skeptic, and you could be the skeptic who I said earlier, who someone hands him a photo and he goes, I'm not going to look at this because it's not real. That skeptic, therefore, has been totally irrational and come to a rational explanation. So you see what I mean? The word rational is completely misused in this case. Maybe the clown had a day off. Now, this is the clown's day off fallacy is the most extreme example of what I was saying earlier about the burden of evidence. And skeptics will do this. So supposing you're walking along the shores of Loch Ness, you see the Loch Ness Monster, you tell a skeptic, and the skeptic will say, no, you didn't see the Loch Ness Monster. All that happened was a clown had a day off from the circus and decided to play a trick on you. He dressed up as a monster uniform, he dressed up in a monster costume and went swimming in the lake to see if anyone would think it was a Loch Ness Monster. And you would say, the answer to that is, well, how do you know? Which clown? Where is he? Could you produce him? Can you give me his phone number? And the skeptic will say, I don't know what clown it is. It's just, it's more likely that it was some clown with a day off from the circus. And you suddenly realise at that point, this is kind of a variation of the Occam's razor fallacy. Because you realise at that point, the skeptic is simply... debunking becomes a feat of the imagination. All you have to do, if someone presents to you a claim which is outside the skeptic milieu, all you have to do if you're a skeptic is think of something that it might be physically possible, regardless of how unlikely it is, and it wins by default because it doesn't involve UFOs or monsters. Now, I never understood why something should win by default just because it doesn't involve UFOs or monsters, but that's what they think. It's according to some kind of principle which I don't quite understand. If you can think of something that doesn't involve UFOs or monsters or ghosts, then you've won the argument just because. And And therefore, it doesn't matter how unlikely it is, it doesn't matter if it is literally just something you thought of off the top of your head. So the clown's day off fallacy is used very, very commonly among skeptics. Now, one of the things that motivates them, I think, is when it comes to this question, are we alone in the universe? Now, the answer to this question, I think, is no. I think most people in this room will probably agree with me, if not all of you. But the skeptic will say something like this. This is why I think there's an emotional element to this. They will say, well, some people think that there are aliens out there and that we're not alone in the universe, but you know, I think they're just doing it because they want that comfort. They don't like the idea. It's uncomfortable to think we're just this tiny little pale blue dot that Carl Sagan calls, you know. No one wants to believe we're just this tiny little oasis of life in this infinite cosmic desert of nothingness. And, you know, some people, they make up these stories because, well, it gives them comfort, so they don't have to face the reality. That's what they say. But, of course, the proviso is, and the immediate follow-on from that is, but I don't need to do that. I can face this harsh reality. I'm strong enough and mean enough and superior enough that I can live my life knowing that I live on the only living planet in the universe. I don't need any kind of cotton wool wrapped fantasy to get me out of my bed every morning. Therefore, I'm very superior to you. And that, I think, means, so when the skeptics say that it's wishful thinking that we're not alone in the universe, I think that cuts both ways. You could say, well, you could answer that it is wishful thinking that if you believe we are alone in the universe, that's also wishful thinking. Because for the reasons I've just described, it gives you a sense of superiority. You can backslap with other people and say, look at us. We can face the truth and these other people can't. We're way above them. Which of course is why they need people like us. See, because from their point of view, if it weren't for people like us, who would they lord it over? It's all academic anyway, because we're not alone in the universe, I believe. And that's a rational explanation. So where do skeptics start? Where do skeptics come from? Now, when we think of skeptics, we think of them as something modern. We think of it something that post-Enlightenment, you know, when people discovered science and they started investigating things rationally rather than just believing in a church and things like that. Everyone sort of says, well, that's kind of where skepticism started, because skeptics rose with the arrival of science and reason. But in fact, skepticism, which what we would recognize as the skeptic movement, began much earlier. It goes back all the way through history. And I think the earliest example of this can be found in ancient India, probably at least the first, very early in the first millennium BC, there was the Charvakas. Now this was an Indian sect, which interestingly, even though they were skeptics, they were considered part of Hinduism, and they still are, even though there were kind of neo-Charvaka movements today. And they believe, if you listen to what they say, it's incredible. It's exactly what skeptics say today. They say, there is nothing that cannot be perceived rational. There is no soul, there is no afterlife, there are no gods. Human beings are matter. Consciousness comes from the brain, all kinds of things like that. Or very often, I think they often thought that it came from the liver rather than the brain, but they did believe that it was a product of the workings of the body. So very similar to what the Richard Dawkinses and Chris Frenches say of this world today. And this is very, I say this is very, very old. This tradition goes back a long way. There's a very funny story, actually, of a chap who, he was actually a skeptic, and he joined the British Humanist Association and became an atheist and a skeptic. And he was very worried because he was from a Hindu family, and his parents were very devout. He used to go to the temple and everything like that and worship the gods on Diwali and things like that. And he wondered how they would cope with him, you know, their son becoming an atheist and a skeptic and a materialist. And eventually he plucked up courage, and he went and told them. He says, "Look, I've joined the British Humanist Association. I'm a skeptic. I don't believe in any of this sort of thing. I'm very, very sorry." And his parents went, "May the gods be praised. Our son has discovered the sacred Hindu tradition of the Charvakas." And they were overjoyed. So, big sigh of relief from him, I think. But I think this guy here, I think, is where the modern skeptic movement, where you think it begins, in terms of the modern practices, probably begins with this guy here. He was a skeptic who was very into bondage and things like that, and S&M, as you can see. He was actually an escapologist. This is Harry Houdini. Now he's a very interesting figure indeed, because he, I think, is the first person who I think had the kind of attitude that modern skeptics have towards the paranormal, in which they essentially challenge us in this particular way that modern skeptics do. They come in your face and say, this is not true, this is not true, this is not true. He was famous for his tricks. He used to escape from things. As you can see, he's locked up in chains now, but he could break out of these chains. He could pick locks with his bare teeth and things like that. Amazing chap. They locked him in a milk churn and filled it with water once, and he managed to get out of it.
Drunk it.
He didn't. No one ever realised the secrets of his tricks. But they locked him in bank vaults, inside the body of a dead whale once. It was amazing. And he became world famous. Now, he died, interesting, he died on Halloween night in 1926 after a short illness, because someone punched him in the stomach in a fight, and he got a ruptured appendix. But long before then, he said to his wife Bess and to his mother, he said, these mediums, these psychics, they're all fake, they're all fake. And he got very angry, because when his mother died in particular, he was extremely upset, because he saw mediums at spiritualist churches and seances, as he saw it, pretending to channel the spirits of the dead to grieving relatives and things like that, making money off it and things like this, and he hated that sort of thing. And so he went on a crusade to try and put a stop to them. And he offered a cash prize for anyone who could prove scientifically that they could do what they claimed to do. By the way, could someone give me a time call? I'm going 3/4 of an hour. Sorry, how am I doing?
5 minutes.
Right, you are. He offered a cash prize to anyone who could do it. No one ever claimed it. Now, there's another skeptic, a more recent one, who actually did the same thing. I'll talk about him. Yeah, but I'll talk about him later. But Houdini was open-minded enough to examine the possibility that there might actually be an afterlife, and it may be possible once you're in that afterlife to communicate with the living people you leave behind. So what he did was he left a coded message with his wife Bess. He wrote it in a letter. Only the two of them knew about it. They locked it in a safe. No one else ever saw it. But it was a letter with coded information in it. So, and then he encouraged her to go to see all the mediums she could. And he says, Bess, if I die before you do, I'll come back and I'll give you this coded message if it's really me, so you'll know that it's true. And as it happens, he died very suddenly. I mean, he was not very old. He died very suddenly. But Bess indeed did do that. Now, according to official stories today, you'll find out that Bess actually never got the coded message from Harry after his death. However, today the Harry Houdini fan club, they still hold an annual seance every year at the Knickerbocker Hotel in New York City. Say, Harry, come back, and Harry apparently never come back. But what's something very interesting, and this comes into other subjects about how information is suppressed, because I got given a present. It was a book it was the Reader's Digest Encyclopedia of the Paranormal, 1983, very old. Out of print, obviously. One of the porters at my hospital found it on the League of Friends stall and bought it for me. It was very nice of him. I had a look through it, and there was a page here on Houdini, and I read through it, and it led me to write an article called The Houdini Code, which you can find on my Hapanmo blog today. Because in this article, it claims that Bess actually did get a coded message from Harry Houdini on one of the seances. He came through with the actual code that she had arranged with him, and she reported it. But that now is not repeated in any modern literature. You have to go back to a book from 40 years ago to get that information. So it's always worth looking at the older books. If you come across an older book on the paranormal or ufology or something, always look at it. Always look at it. There are several organisations. I'll have a break after this one, Steve. All right. There are several organisations connected to skepticism. Now, of course, we have organisations too. There's Bufora, there's SUFON, of course, there's many, many others. But the skeptics have their equivalent, as I was explaining, in terms of intellectual groups and things like that. And this is the biggest. It's called the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry, but it used to be called the Committee for the Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal, a PSYCOP. And everyone thinks that's kind of a joke. PSYCOP, the policeman of psychical research. Apparently, it wasn't intentional, according to their founder, Paul Kurtz. It was founded by a guy. It was founded in 1975 by a man called Paul Kurtz, who is a rather shady character. And in the longer version of this talk, I go into more details about that. But all the major skeptical figures, including those I'm going to talk about in the second half, are members of, in some way associated with this group. It holds an annual conference. It publishes a magazine called The Skeptical Inquirer. It does many other things. It organises investigations and things like that. And it's interesting to look into it and look at what they say. And I've been investigating that an awful lot. And the people associated with it, there's quite an interesting array of characters, I must say. They're very different in many, many different ways. All united, though, by their disbelief in what we believe. So, drinks are served, I think, ladies and gents, and hope you enjoyed that. I will come back and do some more in a little while. Thank you very much.
Interesting point you mentioned about Psychop, but actually, by some strange coincidence, tonight, Psychop they're doing a talk on Ben Emlyn Jones.
I bet one of them...
15-minute break?
Yeah. In the second half, I'll tell you, a couple of them had a bit of a go at me. So, yeah.
15-minute break on Facebook, on the emails going around, you know. By the way, if anybody wants to be added to our emailing list, come and see me after. I'll write your email address down, okay? Okay, so put your hands together for the second half with Ben Emlyn Jones.
Thank you. Thank you. Just got to head in. The projector's off.
Stand by.
Oh, right, it's probably that, yeah. Because my computer went on sleep, so... I should come on now. Thanks, mate. Cheers. That's good. It's good stuff.
Here it comes.
Yeah, it's warming up. Ta-da. That's it, yeah. That's the Psychop slide, yeah. Are we rolling? Here we are. Alright, so ladies and gentlemen, hope you had a good break. Thank you to all the people who purchased copies of the Roswell Rising, Roswell Revealed and Roswell Redeemed. I hope you'll like them. In fact, if you're a member of this group and you're interested in this group, you'll definitely like them. There's 3 left, so at the end, form an orderly queue, but it might be too late. Now, the Skeptical Inquirer is a magazine which is published by the CSI. I think it's, yeah, I was just thinking, just mustn't get my magazines mixed up here. And there's one called The Skeptic, which I think is Michael Shermer's magazine. But this is the CSI magazine. The reason, interestingly, Psychop changed its name to CSI because of a lawsuit by Uri Geller, who I'm sure you're familiar with. There's a long, complicated story about that. It's a rivalry that goes back about 50 years. I don't have time to go into it now. But this is the equivalent of like Nexus or UFO Truth magazine or UFO Data, all these other magazines that come out on our side of the debate. And they discuss a lot of the very similar subjects that these do. I've got some copies of Nexus with me, actually. I was reading them on the train. And I've read Skeptical Inquirer. I've actually... the UK Skeptic magazine, I actually subscribed to them for a year. That was edited by Professor Chris French, who I talked about before. It's now edited by Deborah Hyde, who's another skeptic. So, as you can see, they're discussing the face on Mars. According to the skeptics, of course, it's just a randomly shaped lump of rock with all the other things surrounding it. But obviously, you see, this is what I mean about it being a parallel world. You can read these magazines. You can even recognise the subject, certainly. You can even recognise some of the stylistic elements to the magazine, but it's approaching it from another angle. It's like being Alice going through the looking glass. There's several of these magazines in the UK, like UK Skeptic magazine, you know, several others. Excuse me. And pardon me, that was just a coincidence, I'm sure. Now we're going to talk about some of the individuals who make up the skeptic movement. A variety, a motley crew of characters of various shades, various characters, various abilities, various levels of honesty, intelligence. And you've got to start with this guy. This is the great-grandfather and godfather of modern skeptics. It is James Randi. His real name, Randall James Hamilton Zwing. born in 1928, about 18 months after Harry Houdini died. Now, I'm interested in reincarnation, so I can't help wondering, when I listen to this guy, listen to what he says, whether Harry got to the spirit world and thought, I want to have another go. I want to come back and try again as somebody else. And so he came back as this guy, James Randi. And he actually passed away a few months ago, and I did a special program about it on my show. And I did a couple of interviews about it, because it really was an end of an era, actually, when James Randi died. Randi was one of these people, I mean, people say he's painted his own life in a slightly rosy-coloured hue, and indeed he has been caught out telling a few porkies now and again. But he said he was one of these kids who was too bright for school. So he was too intelligent to go to school. So he used to bunk off school and he used to go down to downtown Toronto, Canada, where he lived. He used to go into theatres and watch the great magicians perform. And he wanted to do that. He wanted to be a magician, like a stage illusionist. And when he was, I think, like 15 years old, he ran away from home and joined a circus, apparently, and became the amazing Randi. And he was very similar to Houdini in the sense that he saw people who were using the same methods as stage magic as he saw it, but were pretending to be really magic. And they'd often charge a lot amount of money, for example, performing miracles, telling you your fortune, telling you which job to apply for, which horse to bet on in a race, things like that. And for a small fee, they would go and they would do that, contact your dead relatives, things like that. And Randi, as he saw it, realised these were just charlatans. They were using the same methods as stage illusionism, but they were pretending to be real. And the bane of his life was Uri Geller, who actually he rose to prominence in 1970. He came over from Israel and started bending spoons and things like that. He's a bit of a, he's not a very original magician in that sense. However, there's a story behind Uri Geller, which I don't have time to talk about now, but he was recruited to the remote viewing program for the CIA and for Mossad. It's a very, very long story, but that's actually been confirmed now. But Randi never talks about that, and there's a reason why he doesn't, which I will talk about in the longer version of this discussion. But he founded the James Randi Educational Foundation, and there's several conferences he set up, which were called The Amazing Meeting, after The Amazing Randi, and they became very successful. There's been about, I think there's been about 15 of those conferences, including one over here in Britain. There was TAM London, which I went along to, actually. It was in the London Metropole Hilton, a very, very posh place. It wasn't cheap, actually. I couldn't afford to go again. I just went once, and again, it was strange to be there and realise that I was kind of in a parallel world. And but I had some very interesting experiences, which I'll talk about in a little while, when I was there, not just relating to Randi. I met Randi, actually. I spoke to him. He's a quite short guy, and I just said hello to him. I was actually introduced by a guy called Dave Allen Green, who he runs the Westminster Skeptics in the pub, who has outed me as a woo-woo. Yeah, well, actually, it was one of the troll didn't like. Actually, wrote to him and said, "Are you aware you have a believer attending your conferences, your skeptic meetings?" And he said, "Yeah, that's all right." And when I went in again, Dave came up and he said, "I've been hearing stories about you, Ben." But anyway, he was all right. Dave was fine with me attending, being a believer and attending. But he introduced me to Randi, and I spoke to Randi briefly. But he has like a. He is a showman, essentially. He's trained his entire life to perform on stage to people. He's been on TV, he's been on tours, he's been all over the place. He's really like somebody who knows how to act. He essentially is an actor, and he does act. And he tells untruths about people. There's a guy called Rupert Sheldrake, who is willing to work with skeptics. He works closely with Chris French. He's the guy who came up with morphogenetic fields, so he's kind of on our side of the fence with things like that. But he won't work with Randi because Randi's a liar. I've got an audio, actually, I play in the longer version of this talk, where he goes into more detail about the fact that Randi attacked him personally and tried to smear him. Randi's done this several times to people. But he is considered a lily-white angel of skepticism. Within the skeptic movement, everyone thinks he's wonderful. He's everybody's granddad. And his death actually means it really is the end of an era for a skeptic movement, I think. But the reason people I think, really look up to him within the skeptic movement is this. That is $1 million US. Randy has done exactly the same as Houdini. Or maybe it's Houdini in Randy's body. We don't know. But it's even more money. Randy in the 60s decided, because he did what Houdini did, he decided to expose what he saw as the fake mediums. So he set up the James Randi $1 Million Challenge. This is organised and administered by the James Randi Educational Foundation. And what you do is, he challenges people who believe in something or have some kind of psychic ability or can do anything miraculous to prove it in a properly controlled scientific test, properly organised, by conditions which are agreed beforehand with lawyers and with everyone else. If you can go up and you can perform it in a controlled investigative condition, he will give you $1 million US. And no one's ever won those $1 million. And this, for Randy, is his way of saying all these things are not true. These people are all lies, because if it was true, someone would have come along and won this $1 million. In fact, do you remember me saying that skeptics like old jokes? Well, one of the old jokes is that when Randy's on stage, and this happened at the TAM London, French was actually the master of ceremonies, and he said, Randy, I can't help imitating his voice. Randy, tell me, in all the times that you've been administering the $1 Million Challenge, has anyone ever come along and made you think, this is it, we've got someone who's going to win it? And Randy says, no. And everyone laughs. Everyone knows he's going to say that, but they still laugh, and they laugh nonetheless. Now, you might think, and on the surface, that this is what skeptics will always bring this up. How come nobody's ever won the JREF $1 Million Challenge? And when you go to the JREF website, it's actually been stopped now. Actually, it was stopped. So the challenge was discontinued a couple of years ago, when Randy sort of stepped back and sort of retired. But before then, you could look at the pages, and I think they're all archived. You look through it, it all does look above board. It has superficially, you can read through that and think, yes, this makes sense. If I had some kind of psychic ability, I'd go for this and I'd win the $1 million. But it's not quite what it appears to be. This is a lawsuit here by George Simpson. You can see here, there's the firm at the top. This is This is a lawsuit against the JREF. It mentions DJ Grothy, who was the president of the JREF. And James Randi, Randall James Hamilton's wing. George Simpson basically applied for the $1 Million Challenge, and he then went on to sue the JREF for wrongful termination of contract. This is very interesting. Now, the skeptics don't talk about this. They never talk about it. There was one thread on the CSI forum, I remember, because I'm actually a member of lots of these skeptic forums. I go under a fake ID. I don't tell them who I am. But I'm a member of some of these skeptic forums. I used to be. I don't really bother with them anymore. But when this came up, there's a very, very short thread, which no one ever really got into very much. And it ended, basically the theme of it was, oh, we're all on Randy's side. Randy's the good guy here. And they never really explored the details of this very much. And they don't, I'm going to bring up another case in a minute where they also seem to have a very extraordinary lack of perception of themselves, an extraordinary inability for introspection. But this actually is monumental, because what happens, Simpson sued them. What he basically is claiming is that he applied for the $1 Million Challenge, he did the preliminary tests and passed the preliminary tests, then he assumed, because that's what the rules say, the JREF would invite him back to do the proper test, and they just stopped returning his calls. They ghosted him. They wouldn't answer his emails or nothing like that. So he took this to court, and he said, they can't do this according to their own contract. They can't just terminate me like this. Yeah, I went above board. It's all done above board according to all these long list of rules that are part of the JREF. So the JREF didn't really have a leg to stand on. Now, what's interesting is that this went to and fro for a while. It was covered on this CSI thread, the only place in the entire skeptosphere where anyone was talking about it. And then what happened was the CSI deleted the thread. And all details were removed from all the other places. George Simpson's website also removed all details relating to this incident. So basically both sides, Simpson and the JREF, both went quiet and they didn't discuss it anymore. And that can only mean one thing: they settled out of court. And that's an interesting question. Why? Why did Grothy and the others at the JREF settle? Why did they settle out of court? Why didn't they fight this? If the JREF $1 million challenge really is the last word, the black and white line in the sand over which every paranormal claim has to pass over, and it's so simple, it's so obvious, it's so transparent that if real paranormal abilities existed, then we'd know about them because of this. If that is true, why didn't they fight it in court? Just think what great publicity that would have been for Randy, for the JREF, for the Skeptic movement. They fought George Simpson in court and won. A guy, you can imagine Randy, can't you? A guy tried to sue me one day, and well, I took him to court and I screwed him. Just imagine that, but they didn't. That's an interesting thing which they don't talk about. The Skeptics don't talk about it. This is Project Alpha. This is very interesting. That there on the right is James Randi, and the two guys next to him, those two young fellows, are Mike Edwards and Steve Shaw. Steve Shaw at the bottom there, he's today called Banachek, and he's a magician. Yet a number of years ago when they were kids, they were like amateur magicians, and they used to do card tricks and bend spoons like Uri Geller. And they didn't do it professionally, they just did it to amuse their school friends, just to play tricks in class and things like that. Yet something very interesting happened. James MacDonald of McDonnell Douglas, he's a bit like Bob Bigelow. You know, Bob Bigelow's doing this Bix thing. That's not this other guy, James MacDonald. In 1979, he tried to do something similar. He called it the James MacDonald Psychic Laboratory. He set it up at the Washington University, USA. And he paid $500,000 which he put into it. It was a lot of money in those days. He recruited the best psychic researchers in the world to come and study at this laboratory to try and find real paranormal phenomena. And so it's privately funded by him. It was all out of his own pocket. He's a real enthusiast, James MacDonald. He really was. Randy decided to try and infiltrate this group and put in some fake psychics to see how far they would go. This way, just seeing how good were these researchers that MacDonald had actually recruited. Were they really up to the scratch? Was paranormal investigation and psychical research really a proper science? That's what was what was being tested here. So he got Shaw and Edwards now to go. He said, go up to, because they're unknown, like these two guys. Like I said, they were just amateurs. They did tricks at school. They didn't have a public face where, you know, if they turn up and MacDonald could like look them up and find out they were working for Randy or something. You go in there, use your tricks, see how far you can get. Now there were two stories to this. Firstly, according to James Randi, there's a video of him boasting about it. Game, set and match to him. Edwards and Shaw went in there. Mac Labs were overwhelmed. Their eyes were spinning because they found real psychics. And Stephen Shaw was sitting there going like that, doing their little tricks, you know, bending spoons secretly and things like that, switching props and stuff like that, and going, we got them fooled here, we got them fooled. And then in 1983, the big reveal came. Mac Labs people organised a press conference, and they invited all the world's media. This was their moment. This is when they were going to get a Nobel Prize. Ladies and gentlemen, we have two real psychics that have been scientifically proven to be true. Come in, Steve Shaw and Mike Edwards. Steve Shaw and Mike Edwards come up to the microphone and they go, and everyone goes to them, Steve, Mike, tell us about what you were doing at Mac Labs. And he goes, well, to be honest, ladies and gentlemen, we were cheating. Shock, horror, red faces, embarrassment all round. Everyone at Mac Labs goes, oh my God. And they walk away and they're really, and they're totally and utterly shamefaced. Randy likes playing these little tricks on people, you know. That's the story according to James Randi. However, someone called Michael Thalborn has written another article about this. It was actually published in Nexus magazine, which actually takes that whole thing apart and realises that Randy is actually presenting a fake account of what really happened. Firstly, the Mac Labs team never, ever made that announcement. They never said that Edwards and Shaw were the real thing. They were interested at first with what they were doing, but they never actually made. They said they were encouraged by the initial tests they were doing, but they never actually came forward and said Shaun Edwards are real. And in fact, later on, one of them said that they actually suspected those guys of playing magic tricks. And they started to control from it, and once they controlled for it, they realised that they didn't take any more interest in these guys. The event, which took place in 1983, was not a Mac Labs press conference, it was Nature magazine. The Mac Labs team just had a little segment in there, which is the warm-up act. Thirdly, Shaw and Edwards were dropped from the project in 1982, a whole year before the Mac Labs presentation. They were told they were actually invited back just for old time's sake when they did this press conference. So, who's telling the truth here, Randy or Thalborn? You can believe Randy if you like, but he's a showman, and he lies. There's several people who found out that he was lying. But credit where credit's due. Peter Popoff. Now, this is one of these televangelists. And the reason I'm bringing this up, because this is something good that Randy did, but it led to something very, very bad later on. Peter Popoff is one of these televangelists. Now, this is a uniquely American phenomenon, where these preachers with these big Southern Baptist voices, they fill football stadiums full of people going, "Oh, the Lord is with you," and healing, apparently performing miraculous healing on people. And what about Popoff is that when he was doing this miraculous healing, he seemed to know everyone's name in the audience. He seemed to know who they were. And he said that the angels were telling him when he was doing this miraculous healing. However, someone in the audience noticed that he had like some strange object in one of his ears. It was actually an electronic earpiece covered by a flesh-coloured piece of plastic so it couldn't be seen. And what they thought was that he was getting insider information beamed to him by someone basically talking to him into his earpiece, giving insider information on the audience. Because the audience, when they were coming in, they filled out prayer cards, giving them the names and everything, put them in there. It's what they do. As I said, this is an American sort of a big business American religious practice. So Randy sent in a guy with a radio scanner. In 1986, a man sneaked in there with this radio scanner to see what he could pick up. And indeed, they picked up the signal of somebody beaming a radio signal to the earpiece, and you could hear him talking. The lady at the bottom of the row is called so-and-so. That lady over there is called so-and-so, things like that. So, to be honest, this guy was a con man. He was proven to be a con man, and someone exposed him, and if Randy did that, well, good. The problem is, skeptics suffer from a terrible problem when it comes to hubris. They get too big for their boots, and as I said, because of their lack of understanding of themselves, they often make enormous blunders. They who claim to be the ultimate arbiters of what is true or false through science and reason and evidence and empiricism and all these sorts of things show a remarkable lack of understanding of what that process really is. Case in point, psychic Sally Morgan. You seen this lady? Yeah. She's a very famous psychic medium, appeared on the Living Channel. Today she does theatre tours and things like that. Now, what happened was she appeared in Dublin, Ireland, and someone in the audience claimed they heard someone backstage talking and was whispering things which they assumed were connected to what Sally was supposedly channeling. And what happened was the skeptics took this, they picked it up, and they blew it out of proportion. And Paul Zenon, who's a famous magician and skeptic, the two often go together, he published an article in the Daily Mail saying Sally Morgan is pulling a Popoff. She's doing exactly the same thing. She has a radio earpiece and she's receiving not psychic messages but radio messages from someone backstage giving her information on the people in the audience. They probably had to fill out, obviously you had to fill out, buy a ticket and had to fill out a form and things like that. The problem was there's no evidence that this is the case. Now if I'd been, this is where I out-skeptic the skeptics, because if I'd been in that position, what I would have done is I'd have done what James Randi did. I'd have got someone with a radio scanner, inserted them into the audience to see if they could pick up the transmissions, and see if Sally has something in her ear. Get like a telescope and zoom in and see if she's got something in her ear, the earpiece. That's what I would do. And if she was found, if she was doing that, if she's really doing that, I would say expose her, name and shame her, boot her out of the whole mediumship circles. But no one did that. They didn't bother doing that. They didn't bother gathering the evidence. Paul Zenon just published this article, and Sally Morgan sued him and won £110,000 in damages plus costs very richly deserved, I might add, because she suffered harassment. As I said, there is a skeptic thug element, which I talk more about in the longer version of this talk. But they sent her death threats and all kinds of threats. They sent her pictures of dead bodies. Now, that's an interesting modus operandi, because the skeptic thug element have sent other people pictures of dead bodies when they don't like them and want to harass them and threaten them, including someone called Rebecca Watson, who I talk about in the longer version of this talk. I suspect the same people who attacked Rebecca Watson were the people who attacked Sally Morgan. So the 110,000 in damages was richly deserved. What's really galling is the skeptics themselves seem completely unaware. They seem in blissful ignorance of the magnitude of their blunder. The forums were abuzz saying, "Oh, this really isn't fair. Of course she's using an earpiece. We all know that." Paul Zen and the Daily Mail had defending Paul Zen and defending the Daily Mail. There was only one skeptic actually who seemed to get it. I can't remember his name, but he wrote an article explaining, this could have been a wonderful moment for the skeptic movement to expose her the way Randy exposed Popoff, but instead they snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. I mean, do these people actually understand what evidence actually is? You're going to go to court with something like this. Just imagine you went to court and said, Sally Morgan's using an earpiece. The Honour says, "Where's your evidence?" His Honour, the judge, "Where's your evidence?" "Well, Your Honour, we sort of Occam's razored it, and a burden of evidence, and which is more likely, and onus. Case dismissed. Remember, skeptics, ordinary claims require ordinary explanations. Now this Mick West, I'm sure you've heard of this. Anyone in UFO circles will know about Mick West. Just a bit small there, but that is the guy I showed you earlier. Now he runs something called metabunk.org, which is a general sort of skeptic thing. But he's become very, very vocal since 2017, because the arrival of what I call new ufology has galvanised this guy. And I've been looking at all the things he's been saying. Now, if you want to know what I mean by new ufology, basically anyone who says UAP instead of UFO is a new ufologist. Basically it's what's emerged out of the whole 2017 ATIP TTSA stuff. And he's a very, very staunch critic of them all. And he's completely wrong about all kinds of things, in the same way that all skeptics are wrong. He says David Fravor saw seagulls, he saw a reflection in the cockpit canopy of his aircraft and things like this. Almost anything. Again, this is the clown's day off fallacy. He said, well, they said, well Mick, you're saying he saw seagulls? He's a pilot. He may have seen it. Mick says, oh, he may have seen an airliner. Oh my God, I'm never going to fly again. If a fully armed fighter jet can't tell the difference between an airliner and anything else, I don't want to go on an airliner. And the whole cockpit canopy thing was, he said that the Tic Tac was the reflection in the cockpit canopy. Again, this is the clown's day off fallacy, because he's just making that up. He doesn't know it. He's just conjuring it up off the top of his head. He interviews people on both sides of the argument. This guy is different from a lot of skeptics in that he's one that's, well, he's not different from all of them, to be fair. He's like I mentioned, Dave Allen Green, Chris French. He's a sort of guy I could sit down and I could have a discussion with him. I could go to the bar right now. I could have a pint with him, have a pint of lager, and talk about things, And I think he'd be civil. He is actually respectful. I think he's wrong, but he's respectful. He interviews people who don't agree with him. He had some very interesting interviews with UFO Jesus. Do you know the guy I mean? Post-Disclosure World, the YouTuber, the guy with the long hair and the beard. Now this is Michael Shermer. This is a very interesting chap, because this is one of the rock stars. He's an American, but he's like the Chris French guy. He's the renter skeptic, which is a quote from another pop skeptic. He is the guy you call up whenever you have something in the media. If you're American, this is the guy you'll probably call up. He's written books like the Skeptics Encyclopedia, Why Do People Believe Crazy Things, and other things like that. He's a very, very die-hard skeptic. Now his background is very interesting, and his story in the last few years has become even more interesting. What he did was, you see, he used to be a long-distance cycle racer, and one day he was riding along, very tired, because it's an exhausting sport. Long-distance cycle racing is very exhausting, and he had a hallucination. He had an altered state of consciousness, and which involved manifestations and everything. And he, unlike many people, unlike other people I'm going to speak about tonight, he didn't start off believing it all to be real. A lot of them start off believing that this is like a real experience. They're really seeing other worlds and other entities, and they're these angels and things like that. And then they become a skeptic later. He didn't do that. He started off immediately, in his view, understanding that what he saw wasn't real. It was just a trick of his brain, because basically it's caused by exhaustion and hyperventilation, because he was cycling a long distance. So he became a psychologist to try and work out why these things happen. Why do people see these sorts of things? And he went on to become the editor of Skeptic magazine. He does all kinds of other skeptic things. He organises a skeptic conference. He's very much, like I say, this rock star kind of person. Now, over the last few years, something very interesting has happened. Firstly, a lot of the skeptics turned against him, because there's a factional fight that's broken out in the skeptic movement, several actually, which I talk about in the longer version of this lecture. And he became the target of a lot of abuse from the skeptic thug element. But also, even this was after that happened, so you can't just blame it on that. After that happened, he posted something on his website, which is really amazing. I mean, his website's not very interesting, michaelshermer.com. He just publishes links to his Scientific American articles. He published an article saying, and I'm paraphrasing it, I can't remember the exact quote, "I've just had an experience which rocked me back on my heels. It shook my skepticism to its core. We should never close our minds to the mysterious and magnificent, regardless of their causal nature." What a remarkable thing for a skeptic to say. And indeed, this caused a little bit of a stir in the skeptic forum world. They thought, what's happening here? What's he talking about? And he went on to say, if I had heard this story from other people, I wouldn't have believed it. And he has heard it from other people and he's not believed it. The story was this. He got married to a woman called Jennifer, a German lady. And they got married in his home in California, USA. And they had she moved over from Germany to live with him there, and brought all his belongings, all her belongings with her, was shipped over, including an old-fashioned radio, a 1978 Philips transistor radio. It didn't work, but she kept it for sentimental reasons, because it belonged to her father who died. Hadn't worked for years, hadn't worked at all. So Shermer said, maybe I can get this to work, so he put his screwdriver and started fiddling with its inside, breaking Occam's razor in that respect. He couldn't get it to work, so he shoved it into his desk drawer in his study and left it. There. Because he didn't want to throw it away. His wife wanted to keep it for that reason, because her dad was dead. Then the wedding began in his home. In the US, you can get married in your own home. And not the vicar, because he's an atheist skeptic. The celebrant, they were just exchanging vows with the celebrant, with all their friends and family around them. And suddenly, the sound of music breaks out in the room. Shermer goes, oh my God, some bugger's gone and left their mobile phone on, haven't they? That's what usually happens at these sort of things. He looks around angrily. Everyone goes, not me, mine's switched off. But the music is coming from upstairs. He goes upstairs. The music is coming from his study. He goes into the study. The music is coming from the drawer in the desk. He opens it up, and this old Philips transistor radio is playing music. It's not just playing any song either. It's playing a song that Jennifer's dad particularly liked. And it was a song that was not broadcasting on any local radio station. And indeed, modern radio stations are all digital now. Analog, this is an old analog radio, wouldn't have picked it up anyway. And Jennifer, it happened just as they were exchanging vows, and Jennifer was just thinking, wouldn't it be lovely if my dad was here? I wish he was here. How about that, eh? And so is Michael Shermer about to fall off the skeptic wagon? Is he about to cross the aisle? If he does, then he'll get a lot of abuse, because the skeptics don't take kindly to such a high-level defection. They really won't. So I kept a very close eye on this guy. This was a few years ago this happened. I kept a very close eye on what he was up to. Nothing happened for a while. This often happens. He just carried on walking down Skeptic Avenue for a while, brushing himself off and just carrying on. And that these sort of road to Damascus experiences are actually quite rare. You don't get them all the time. Usually what happens is seeds are planted. You know that phrase, seeds, let's plant the seeds, let them grow. And so I thought to myself, even though he's just carrying on as normal, being a skeptic, he may have had an experience, he may have got something from that experience which will eventually mature and bloom within him and cause him to change his mind. And then he appears on the Joe Rogan show with Graham Hancock. This is more recent. The first time that it's very belligerent, they're arguing. Then he appears again, and he's Graham Hancock, who of course is like one of these. He's a sort of spiritual person. They get on very well. Now I found out that Shermer and Graham Hancock are now good friends. And Graham Hancock is trying to persuade Shermer to take ayahuasca in the Brazilian jungle like he did. Do you remember that about how Graham Hancock took this psychoactive drug? I think we may be about to see the fruits of Shermer's experience here, and he may well have a change of heart, I think. Because skeptics do change their minds. Skeptics do come over to our side. Indeed, sometimes people on our side go over to them. I mean, they both make converts from each other. I'm going to discuss a character in a little while, who is one of those people who went over from our side to them. But so both sides make converts from each other. They sort of pass each other in opposite directions. And this is who I'm talking about, Susan Blackmore. Yes, you've heard of her. She is like she was Renter Skeptic, and indeed she calls herself that. She coined the phrase Renter Skeptic as a sort of self-deprecating joke, but that's what she was. Whenever this is British lady, whenever she was on TV, whenever she was on TV, it was always because one of us was in the studio. It's possible because you guys are in the media a lot. Emlyn, Steve, you're in the media a lot. You may well have bumped into her if at some point. I don't know if you did, but she was always brought in to provide balance, to provide the skeptic side of the story. Interesting thing though was she was like a real New Age spiritual person for a long time. What happened was, it's an interesting story. In 1970, she was at St Hilda's College in Oxford. It's a women's college in Oxford. And she was doing what students do, partying, getting drunk, taking drugs. Well, I don't know exactly what drug she took, but she reports that it gave her the most incredible trip imaginable. And it changed her life. She was absolutely certain that this experience she'd had under the influence of the drug was real. And she said that she's just dropped whatever she was doing. She switched the courses she was on, and she immediately said, I need to be able to prove this. I can't remember what course she was on, something else, but she immediately went and enrolled in a parapsychology course. I've got to prove this. I know it's real, but I've got to prove it. Well, she kept doing this for a while. Then in 1979, Dr. Carl Sargent came on the scene. Now, Dr. Carl Sargent, he was doing these experiments because Susan Blackmore always thought that psi was the best way of getting the evidence she needed. Psi is like a laboratory investigation of psychic phenomena and mind powers and things like that. And he was using the Ganzfeld test. Now, Ganzfeld is where people try to transmit thoughts from one room to another, where the two people have no contact. If you've seen people lying around with golf balls over their eyes in red light, that's the Ganzfeld experiment. And Sargent was getting these amazing results from Cambridge, at Cambridge University, for these Ganzfeld tests. And Susan Blackmore was overjoyed. She thought, this is it. So she phoned up Sargent and she said, can I come to you? Can I come and work with you? Can I please come to your laboratory and supervise you? Please, let me come to your laboratory and supervise you. And he said, yeah, sure. So she burnt rubber getting up to Cambridge, and after a while she published a report for the Journal of the Society for Psychical Research, and you can almost feel the pain in the words she writes. It's still on her website now. She concluded that Sargent was committing scientific fraud. He was cheating. He's producing fake data to get the wrong results. And she was very unhappy about this, but it got much worse. She was called into the office by a head of department who said, Susan, how dare you accuse a distinguished scientist, Carl Sargent? How dare you accuse her, you a mere sort of second-rate postgraduate, accusing the wonderful Carl Sargent of fraud? Who do you think you are? And as far as she was concerned, all she was doing her job. She'd gone up there wanting this to be real and found out that it wasn't, and she'd reported that. That was her job, and she did it. And she was being reprimanded and punished for doing what she thought was what she was supposed to do, the right thing. This very much upset her, and I know how much it upset her, because at TAM London in 2010, she was on stage. This wasn't recorded anywhere, but she burst into tears. After 30 years, it hurt her enough that she burst into tears on stage. Now, could I play amateur psychologist for a moment? I don't like doing that, because there's nothing in this world I despise more than an amateur psychologist. Except perhaps a professional one. But if I can play amateur psychologist, I would say possibly she has an axe to grind. Maybe a just one. She is clearly, certainly in 2010, she was bitter and angry over the way she'd been treated. And this could have influenced the fact that a few years after this experience, she said, I was lying in the bath one day, and suddenly it just came to me. Maybe all this is not true. Maybe there is no paranormal, and I've just been chasing an illusion for all these years. And so she became a skeptic, and she developed a second career as a skeptic. But is it possible that what influenced her in that way may not have been something factual or evidential as a part of her research, but because of the emotional pain she felt as the result of this injustice that she perceived was conducted against her? I don't know. If Carl Sargent was cheating, he got away with it. He left science after a while. Today he designs computer games. Richard Dawkins. Now this is an interesting character. This guy is the best-selling non-fiction author in the world. His book, The God Delusion, has anyone actually read it? Who's read that? No one? Oh, Rhiannon, you've read it, and you have as well, sir. Yeah, it's been translated into dozens of languages. It's found all over the place. Very, very influential book indeed. Now, what's interesting about this chap is that he bridges the gap between atheism and skepticism into what it is today, which essentially is an amalgamation of the two movements. I mean, atheism is simply a disbelief in God. I mean, you could be, until Dawkins came along, you could actually be an atheist and still believe in like UFOs and paranormal things and things like that. After Dawkins, you can't. Since Dawkins came along, you have this kind of skeptic milieu. I mean, I talked at the beginning about the Michael Barkan's cultic milieu, which includes people like us, wide-eyed tinfoil hatters like you and me. But the skeptics have their skeptic milieu as well, and Dawkins is basically he created that bridge with his book. He's actually incredibly, he said some incredibly arrogant things actually. There's a guy from Oxford called Alistair McGrath, who is a Christian apologist and a theologian here in Oxford where I live. And he's written a book called The Dawkins Delusion. 10 out of 10 for he's a gutsy man. He uses that kind of interestingly, the American publisher wouldn't let him use that title. It's got a different title in America, but it's called The Dawkins Delusion if you buy it over here. He's written several other books. The Dawkins is God, Where Dawkins Went Wrong, and things like this. Now, if someone writes books about me and saying I'm wrong, I'll say, okay, let them write books saying I'm wrong, and I'll discuss this with them. Dawkins didn't do that. When Dawkins was asked to comment on McGrath, he just said this. He just said, oh, Alistair McGrath has written 3 books with my name in the title. Never before was a dog praised so much by his fleas. I think that's just so ungenerous. It's just so dismissive and I think derogatory. He writes a book, someone doesn't agree with him. Oh my God, they must be nasty. They must be a bad person. I mean, he's involved with Psychop and all the others as well. Oh, here we go. We got to go there. Yes.
The biggest reaction you had tonight.
Yes. Yes, indeed. Last, and definitely least, in this rogues gallery of celebrity skeptics is Professor Brian Cox. Now, who is this guy? This guy is the young apprentice I told you about for Chris French. He's the guy, he's going to be the Mr. Skeptic you call, and he's more besides. I mean, I think he's going to play a completely new role in the media. But as I was saying, Mick West is someone I could sit down and have a beer with. if I sat down with this guy, the beer would go over his head. He's one of the most unpleasant, arrogant, obnoxious individuals in the public sphere today. He can't get into debates with people. He appeared on an Australian program called QI, and he was just interrupting, he was insulting, he literally threw papers at somebody. It was disgraceful. It was disgraceful behaviour. But where does he come from? I mean, who is this guy? I mean, he was apparently, according to people who knew him in the scientific world before he was famous, they said he was a second-rate particle physicist. He got like a 2-2 degree, scraped into a job with CERN at the Large Hadron Collider. But then the BBC did a documentary about Albert Einstein in 2005, the centenary of the relativity, and this guy was on it. And what can I say? Opportunity knocked. A star was born. Doesn't matter how much he knows about. It doesn't matter how. Thanks for coming. It doesn't matter how much he knows about his subject. You know, he has shiny white teeth and silky black hair and a high-pitched, effeminate voice, and, you know, and that's what gets you on TV. And of course, an ability to repeat anything I tell you to repeat. And also, I should add, the things he comments on, he knows nothing about anything except particle physics. I'm sure he knows everything, loads of things about particle physics that I couldn't learn in every lunchtime I had. But this guy, he comments on everything else that he knows nothing about. David Attenborough, famous naturalist on TV. The guy used to sit in the jungle with gorillas. Famous guy. He's appointed Cox as his natural successor. I mean, that's... Why not a biologist? This guy's a particle physicist. Why not a biologist? How am I doing for times? What's the time, Steve?
2:05.
I better get a move on. Oh, I'll get a move on. Sorry, guys. Now, the skeptocracy, ruled by skepticism. Now, you may think, well, skeptics are into free speech, human rights, but only if you're a skeptic. Who's heard of this? TEDgate. Graham Hancock and Rupert Sheldrake. They appeared on a TEDx Whitechapel. Now, they basically did their talk about spiritual matters, states of consciousness and things like this. And TEDx deleted the TEDx YouTube channel. They deleted the videos. They just said, even though we at TEDx believe in free expression, we believe that we understand that the opinions of those, they are those of the speakers, are not necessarily those of TEDx or TEDx Whitechapel. We nevertheless feel we have a responsibility to our viewers and to our scientific community when those speakers wander too far into the realms of pseudoscience and speculation. So therefore we have removed these videos and intend to place them in a location where their factual issues could be better dealt with. What they did was they put them, as Rupert Sheldrake said, they put them in the naughty corner. Now this is something called TED Controversies, which is another YouTube channel which is apparently for things like that. So they didn't censor them, you understand. They just moved them to this new YouTube channel. But it's a YouTube channel that has a fraction of the subscribers. Funnily enough, it was a YouTube channel that was actually set up after they deleted Hancock and Sheldrake from the main TEDx channel. And even odder, there's only 2 videos on it, and it's those 2. So, but luckily they've gone viral now, and they're all over the place. But it just goes to show, you know, that skeptics often talk about the free exchange of information and things like that, but they don't actually believe it. This motley crew is very interesting. These people here, that's Jamie Ian Swiss on the far right. There's a couple of other people there, and there's Steve Novella on the far left. Now that's a good name because he tells a tall story. And I'm just going to play you a little audio, which should come through that speaker there. Which I think this illuminates this lack of introspection, this absolute blindness to their own nature that the skeptics display. Have a listen to this. It's only about a couple of minutes long.
Pretty good, about 6. So I guess the goal then is to really teach them to be critical thinkers and let religion take care of itself.
I think it would, but you know, it's always a risk. You know, I do. One secular humanist parent told me that they basically took the approach of what you just said: teach them to be critical thinkers, but basically say nothing about religion, and then their children will grow up and make up their own mind, which they're going to do anyway. And it turned out that his daughter became a Buddhist, and he was not happy about that. And he thought, in retrospect, that perhaps he made a mistake by leaving it so open-ended. I don't really have the answer. I'm certainly not telling you what to do when it comes to that. But his conclusion was, if I had to do it over again, I would have indoctrinated her into non-belief, basically. I don't believe it.
I would have indoctrinated her into non-belief. I would have indoctrinated her into non-belief. Think about those words. Think about what they mean. Let them echo around your head. Let them catch on every tool you have in your mental arsenal for detecting fallacy, contradiction. I would indoctrinate her into non-belief. Now, if skeptics really believe what they actually are, according to the original definition I read at the beginning from Oxford Skeptics in the pub, and then they say, I would indoctrinate someone into non-belief, that completely nullifies everything within that description. They're essentially saying that the skeptic worldview, that of science, reason, apportioning all evidence, studying the pitfalls of human reason and deception, all those things have to be offline in order to preserve the skeptic worldview. In order to keep being a skeptic, you have to stop thinking in that way. You have to stop being a skeptic to be a skeptic. This really is something you should always bring up. Whenever a skeptic says something like to you, skepticism is not a belief system any more than the off switch is a TV channel. They say things like that all the time. They cannot pretend that anymore. If they're going to indoctrinate people into non-belief. And Novella uttered those words and he just carried on, and he didn't even understand it. This issue went straight over his head. He just carried on. I mean, I forgot the number of the show. It's one of the early episodes of the Skeptics Guide to the Universe, his radio show. Come on. Oh, I've got to just go back on there. One sec, ladies and gents. Oh, come on. That's it. Right, the conveniently told confession story. Right, CTCS, conveniently told confession story. This is something you've got to be aware of. You've got to be wary of this sort of thing. This here is a creature known as Patty. Now, in 1967, this creature was captured by the Patterson Gimlin film, and people, ever since this film was made, people have gone backwards and forwards over whether it is real or fake. Is it true? Is it false? Well, Chris Packham, you may have heard of him. He's a BBC nature presenter. Now, he is David Attenborough's natural successor, not Coxie Boy. Yeah. It's a biologist, it's a naturalist. Anyway, he took a phone call from Bob Gimlin, one of the photographers, the guy who made this, and he said Bob Gimlin confessed that it was fake. He said, "That's my wife dressed in a furry gorilla suit." And we got her to walk in front of the camera, and we made the video. We got a fake Bigfoot video. Now, the response from the skeptics has been, "We have a confession, case closed. Someone's confessed, that's the end of it. You, stop writing. You, put that pen down. We're not going to look at this again. We're not going to study it again. It's all over. It's not real. We know because somebody confessed." But a confession is a claim too, and confessions can be falsified. Dr. Paul Vella, who sadly has passed away, he was a cryptozoologist. He went to this location where this took place. It's been very precisely located within the woods of California, and he did a few measurements using computer-generated imagery and analysis, and he worked out that figure you see there is 6 foot 7 feet tall. Is Bob Gimlin's wife really that tall? Is she? Then he better not whinge her if she burns the toast. Bob Gimlin could well have falsified that confession. He could have faked it, but the skeptics don't look into that. They don't even... If we make a claim, oh, it's got to be proportioned to evidence. If we make a claim but it's a confession that we fake something, no, that's it, we accept it without looking at it again. Case closed. Another example, Alex Malarkey. This is a book called The Boy Who Came Back from Heaven by Kevin and Alex Malarkey. Alex Malarkey was a young boy, injured very badly in a car crash when he was 6 years old, spent the next couple of years in hospital in a coma. Eventually he recovered and he reported what we call a near-death experience. It was a book very similar to Danny and Brinkley's Saved by the Light. I don't know if you've ever read that. This is a very similar book. Anyway, the Skeptics always said maybe he made this up. Anyway, he made a confession on Facebook. He's about 18 now. He's a lot older. And the Skeptics, again, I heard about this on Skeptics Guide to the Universe. Steve Novella, he said, well, Alex Malarkey's confessed that he made the whole thing up. That's it, it's all over, case closed. But, again, is it real? Is there a reason why someone would fake a confession? I think so. Because, see, his parents split up. His mother, Beth, was angry with the husband, and there was some kind of lawsuit involving the royalties of the book. She had to sue her own ex-husband and her own son. Also, you know, he became a celebrity. He's a very sick boy. He was just learning to walk and talk again, and people were knocking on his door every day of the week, and he got fed up with that. So, is it possible that he made up that confession just to try? He may have said to his dad, "Can we just roll this back, and maybe we can live a kind of normal life?" Almost exactly the same as these two ladies. This is Kate and Margaretta Fox. In 1848, they claimed that they've heard strange noises in their house, and they ended up doing a tour in the country. They became international celebrities. They're credited with inventing spiritualism, although it's not true. But again, 40 years later, they confessed that they made the whole thing up. But did they? Because they were both suffering terribly from the celebrity lifestyle. It's not what it's cracked up to be, I don't think. They both had drink problems. Their marriages were in bad shape, and they may have come to the same conclusion as Alex Malarkey. Now, this is the bit you've all been waiting for. Now, this here is Dr. David Clarke and Andy Roberts, who don't like me very much. They said in their column in 14 Times that I was full of retarded guff. I take that as a compliment. But I've actually met these guys. I spoke to them. They were all right when I met them. But the question is that I've got to ask the question: are skeptics just skeptics because they like being skeptics, or are they put into this world to debunk what we say because there's some kind of cover-up? This especially applies to the UFO issue, maybe to others as well, which I'll say at the very end. But you've got to ask some questions. There's actually no evidence that any of the individuals I've talked about today have any connections to intelligence services or psychological warfare think tanks and any of those sorts of things, with one exception, James Randi. With James Randi, there is a reason to be suspicious of his motives. However, I don't have time to tell you about that this evening. I'll go into it in a longer version of this talk. But of all a lot of ufologists and people like this have been accused of perhaps putting out false information deliberately for the sake of covering up the reality of extraterrestrial life. One of them is actually a very old and very respected ufologist indeed in this country, Jenny Randles. Now, Jenny Randles it's been suggested by someone that she is compromised and she's working for some kind of authority that wants to cover up UFOs. Now, the individual actually who made this suggestion is actually someone who tends to make these kinds of suggestions about almost everybody. So I usually take them with a grain of salt, and I'm certainly not accusing Jenny Randles of doing anything wrong in this situation. There's no hard evidence. However, there's no doubt that in the late 90s she took a different turn. She changed her mind, and there may be completely innocent reasons for this. But this is a book she wrote. This was a book she published in 1984, Sky Crash, A Cosmic Conspiracy. Co-authors, as you can see, Brenda Butler and Dot Strait, who today stand by their story about the Rendlesham Forest incident. Come forward in time to 2000, I think it's 2009. UFOs that never were. This is a book all about cases that have been solved and found out not to be real UFOs, and it's like, she's written an entire book about that. I mean, it takes a lot of effort to write a book. I know, because you can see here, I've written 3 of them here. But it seems like a big deal to talk about, to write an entire book about solved cases. It's like sort of walking forward while looking over your shoulder. You know, I thought, well, why did she do this? I mean, I actually met Jenny Randles a couple of years ago. I didn't get a chance to ask her. Look at the co-authors. I don't know if you can see there. Guess who they are? Andy Roberts, Dr. David Clarke, the 2 big skeptics. People who said I was full of retarded guff. Skip that, and that. Now this is Helen Duncan. Now I've done an entire talk on this lady. She was supposedly the last witch, and she was prosecuted in the Old Bailey under the witchcraft trial. Now, if mediums are under the Witchcraft Act of 1735, this is in 1941 this happened. Now, sorry, 1944. And the question has to remain, like, they thought that she was getting secret information from spirits of the dead, and that possibly the German spies were watching her. This was in the middle of World War II. And so she was basically put away in prison so that she couldn't do her mediumship. The question is, though, the question you've got to ask yourself is, if it's not real, why did they do that? Do they all just believe in this sort of thing? Or do they know something deep down that we don't about psychic powers and things like that? And I've done an entire presentation on this. This is alive again after you died. Now, after you're dead. Have any of you seen something called The Discovery? It's a film. It's got Robert Redford in it. Anyone seen that? You've seen that, yeah. It's very interesting, isn't it? Yeah. Because it's on Netflix, so you can. But I think it's spread somewhere else now. It's kind of an example of the kind of what the books I've written about are what would happen if we discovered the truth about UFOs. In other words, a lot of people believe it anyway. But what if the cover-up ended and there was never any doubt? What if the same thing happened with the afterlife? What effect would that have on society? In the film The Discovery, it explores that in very interesting detail. But what's more, Helen Duncan was going to perform in court. She wanted to prove herself innocent by performing a séance in court, and they wouldn't let her do it, even though it could have proved her right. If you want to know more about me, there are still 3 copies of my books there. You see, The Roswell Rising, A Novel of Disclosure, and its 2 sequels. And this is a book, like, if you're interested in UFOs and you know there's a cover-up, just imagine what would happen if that cover-up ended. And I imagined that. And I had a thought experiment which led to a scenario, a story. I'm a writer of fiction. I've written 5 novels and lots of short stories. And so I wrote 3 books about it. And there are 3 copies. There are 3 copies there. £10 for 1 book, 15 for 2, 25 for 3. There we go. And if you want to know more about me, as Steve said at the beginning, I've got a website called HAPANWO, Hospital Porters Against the New World Order. If you go to that website, there's actually how many? I've got 6 blog pages now, a YouTube channel, my own radio shows, a forum. It's a very multimedia experience. So you expect to be there a long time. I know that Rhiannon, you've had a look at a lot of things there, haven't you? Yeah, and I know some of the rest of you have as well. So you know, if you're interested in the subjects talked about at these meetings, and you come regularly to these meetings, and you've enjoyed this meeting, you'll enjoy these books and you'll enjoy my website. But anyway, I really appreciate you. We've gone on a little bit late. And I appreciate you hanging on for me. Thank you very much. Thanks very much.
Q&A?
Have we got time? If you want to ask a question, Steve?
Yeah, first thing you said when you started was, is anyone here a skeptic? And I said yes, and everybody laughed.
Oh, really?
But I think that Emily and myself are indirectly skeptics, because when we go to investigate a UFO sighting, first thing we'll do is try to find a rational explanation. Yeah, and then we'll try and find, is this person looking for insanity? Are they not quite 100% mentally? Are they on drugs? You know, and then we'll try and find a rational explanation. We'll try and find, is it a Chinese lantern? Is it the ISS going over? Is it a satellite? Is it a helicopter in the distance? Is it ball lightning?
Yeah, the process of...
So, to a certain extent, that does make us a little bit sceptic. Although I'm a believer, don't get me wrong, you know I am. Yeah. But there's nothing wrong with having a slight bit of skepticism when you're looking at and interviewing people.
Absolutely, and I apologise if I misrepresented you in any way. But you see, in a sense, what you've just illustrated is the difference between the actual definition which the skeptics give themselves, which I wholeheartedly agree with, which is what you talked about. It's the skeptic who looks at the photo, as I said at the beginning, and says, what's this? And they look into it, they might find it's just a weather balloon. As opposed to the skeptic who says, I'm not even going to look at it, I know it's not real. So, but the second one is the one who is the most most sceptical of all, you see. So that's kind of what the point is of this entire talk, which is what is the definition of being a skeptic, and the people who call themselves skeptics are very often not skeptics in the way you define yourself. Anyone else? Hello? Is someone over there? Did you have your hand up? Anyone else got their hand up? Sir?
I don't really think that James Randi was a skeptic. I think there was something deeper belonging to what he was thinking. I think he did believe, and he was just trying to find other people in the same ilk.
It's if you look at the longer version of this talk, I'll go into it. There's some very suspicious elements of James Randi. His connections to various organisations such as DARPA, and there's also the, ironically, the McDonnell Douglas Corporation, James McDonnell's organisation, which indicate that he knew more than he was saying, and he appeared to be engaged on an active campaign of suppression. So we can't ask him now unless he's gone somewhere we can channel him. That'll be a bit of a surprise for him, but I'm convinced that guy, there is evidence that some history.
A lot of scientists don't say what they believe.
Yeah.
Because they fear losing their jobs. Carl Sagan was one, because I heard that he actually did believe in extraterrestrials, but professionally he kept away.
Yeah, he changed his tune very suddenly, actually, because in the 60s he was into the New Age stuff and things like that. He was like Blackmore, and he changed his position very suddenly, and there's people have asked questions about why that was. Bryce Zabel has actually portrayed this fictionally in the Dark Skies TV series. It's very interesting. Yeah, and it's true, scientists are people, they're human beings. This idea they can just go around drawing perfect circles everywhere and they're never affected by anything other than their rationality, their observations and things like that is false. We already know that if Carl Sargent was cheating, is he the only one? I mean, a lot of them cheat. He was cheating to get positive results, but I'm sure there are many who will cheat to get negative results because they've got rent to pay like everyone else. They have a life outside science which is affected by what they say within their scientific research. Anyone else?
Do you know anything about Peasmore?
About who?
Peasmore.
Peasmore. Yeah, it's a village in Berkshire, and allegedly there is a deep underground military base beneath it. I've been looking for evidence of that, and funnily enough, there is a strange...
I saw something on YouTube where some Australian said he went to Peasmore, and it wasn't. It was in Australia, and he pretended it was actually...
Oh, that's Standeo, isn't it? Yeah, that's Standeo. Yeah, there was a base that definitely exists in Central Australia called Pine Gap, and I've seen it. It's a very strange place. Yeah, it's some people have suggested that there was some kind of distraction. It's probably not actually, but there is something weird at the Harwell laboratory site, which indicates that there was some kind of underground working there, which would tally with what the witnesses said about being the entrance to this base.
Air Force Base, tunnels to the Air Force Base, where so was there King Files or some book Barry King wrote about?
Barry King, yeah, was the witness, yeah.
So it's difficult. There's very little information on it.
Yeah, there is. I mean, there's no evidence at the village itself. I went to visit the village, and there's nothing there, but it's just a normal village. But... Yes, ma'am? Hello.
What case is the case that really you find the most authentic? What case do you think
It's most authentic.
is most authentic?
And the obvious answer is Remington Forest. That's probably the best documented, one of the best documented UFO cases in history. There's many others. There's witnesses. There's several contacts and experiences and people like that. I'm convinced they're telling the truth because they're people I know, and I've actually witnessed some of the strange phenomena that affects them. So yeah, there's so many I couldn't pick one. I don't think. But thanks for the question. Yeah, it's a good question. Anybody else?
What do you think of Derek or
Derek?
have you ever been to one of his...
No, I have not. I know that David Icke actually went to a sitting with him, and so did his wife, and found him very interesting. I know he's been accused of faking things. He's been caught out sometimes making stuff up, and of course when he got, I think getting his job with the media has made him possibly dally around a few curves for the sake of the audience. And I know there's a guy called Ross Hemsworth I know who he used to present something called Ghost Detectives on Channel 4. And he said he's been trying to get in. He often finds it difficult to get back into paranormal broadcasting because they say things like, look, we're going to have to deliver for the audience, whatever, regardless of what you find. Meaning, we have to fake stuff. If you can't find real ghosts, we have to put in fake ghosts. But Derek Acora may well have gone down that road where Ross didn't. So,
you know what? Sorry.
Yeah.
One of his shows, probably about 11 years ago.
He's passed away now too, of course.
Yeah,
So
so
on the other side on that.
passed away. So I was in the Grand Theatre in Swansea. So I went there just to see what was, what his show entailed. And he was calling out these references to people in his brain.
Yeah.
He put the hand up, this is reference anyone there. And as slow as he went through the information, the hands would drop.
Yeah.
So in the end, I looked up, it was my manager at work. And he was having information about his father.
I don't.
Very interesting.
I don't believe he's completely fake. I don't believe he's fake. No, I've known other people who've met him and said,
And when it's some great detail, it's only his family would know. I had a chat with him at work about it, and it was quite compelling.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of genuine mediums, when they get famous, they get pressured into faking stuff. I mean, I met Yvette Fielding once at the conference in the Rawcon, and she swears blind that everything on Most Haunted is real, but I question that. I do. I understand the position she's in. Yes.
I've been watching that series on Roswell on Blade, I think it is.
Yeah.
They've been talking about AI.
Was this the one with that guy where they find Jesse Marcel's diary?
And they talk about this, they can tell it, that he was telling the truth by his face, but it's AI, it's called.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how that, but it's voice and facial expressions. It's similar to a polygraph, yeah. I'm not sure exactly how it works. Yeah. It is very interesting, and I'm not sure exactly how it works, but it's like a polygraph. It won't clear their name, unfortunately, because I know there's been people who've subjected to multiple polygraph tests. Larry Warren, for example, Bob Lazar, Travis Walton, and people still accuse them of making things up. So whatever happens, I mean, it's slightly different method. Yeah, I don't know how accurate it is. There's some. Yeah, hello.
No, this hasn't got a lot to do with what you said tonight. You mentioned Uri Geller earlier on.
Yeah.
And back in 1998, they had him down the Vetch in Swansea. It was the last home game of the season. It was the bottom division, and they were playing Doncaster. And Doncaster had already been relegated to the conference. So they had Geller in the Swans dressing room before the game to give him some positivity and whatever. It was the worst 0-0 draw I've ever seen in my life.
Do you know what he claims? He claims he can do that. He claims he can change the course of football.
Do you know what? Right at half time, he went into the set, stood on the centre spot, and bent the spoon, and all the North Bank was singing at him.
Oh, dear me. I think that guy will say anything to keep people talking about him. He said that in the European Cup finals, he could say, I made the ball go this way and I made the ball go that way. But he didn't do a very good job in the final with the penalty shootout, did he? He didn't do a very good job there, unless he's supporting Italy. But he's recently said things like, "Oh, aliens are going to land." That's his latest thing. He's in the papers. Aliens will be landing, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, like the story."
Would you agree that a lot of information, say in the military in the US, is very compartmentalised, so that very few people know about particular projects?
Yeah.
But my viewpoint is, in a similar way, ufologists and spiritualists are compartmentalised, and we will only make progress on this subject when they come together.
Well, it does help. I mean, John Keel was a researcher who did understand that there were, paranormal phenomena and UFOs were often associated. This doesn't mean that UFOs are somehow ephemeral and they don't produce physical phenomenon, because they do. But that there was a connection between the two. And I do think that Michael Barkin is right about the cultic milieu. If you tend to believe in one thing, you will often believe in another. I'm not the only ufologist who's also interested in spiritualism, for example. There is a massive overlap between the two. Not exclusive, though. Not exclusive.
But the two, they are kept apart, the groups. And it may be that ufologists, skeptics, too skeptical of spiritualists who believe that channeled information is true information, but that will only come out in time, that they are talking the truth in terms of what's happening, and all the subject, it's consciousness is where we're on it.
Funny, I was having a conversation earlier today.
No, I have heard that, because, I mean...
It's really strange, because earlier today I was having a conversation with some people, and it was a private conversation. I won't go into details, but we were talking about something very similar, about a case which is usually thought of as ufological, but may well have nothing more to do with demonology and things like that. And that it's possible that we've generically categorised some of these cases in the wrong file, or they may be more than one phenomenon. We don't know. We don't necessarily understand that. Possibly because we do tend to be too specialised, maybe, which is why I tend to be more ecumenical. Funnily enough, I was chastised. I was a member of the 9/11 Truth Group, and I was chastised once by the chairman because I did a talk and I mentioned UFOs, and he says, "Don't mention that. We don't want to be associated with that." Funnily enough, Bryce Zabel said exactly the same thing in the opposite direction. He said, "Don't talk about 9/11 when you're talking about UFOs, because for the very same reason, it discredits us." Does anyone else want to have anything to say? Anyone else? Any more questions, ladies and gents?
It's not a question, but it's been great tonight. I'd like to follow you on Twitter.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you very much. You're very welcome. Yeah, the details of my website, and it's all on there. I'm at Porterhood on Twitter, and I've got some books here if you're interested, and there's all these other things that you can pick up. Well, thank you very much. Much appreciated. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks all for coming.
Thanks a lot,
see you next month. Hopefully on the first Tuesday. April the 5th. Okay.
There's still 3 books left. Who wants 3 books? Well, it's about midnight, and I'm back at the Premier Inn in Swansea, and so I'm going to go to bed and have a good night's sleep after quite a busy evening of hard work but great fun. I had a wonderful time. Someone did get me a pint of lager afterwards, which was very much needed, and I have a wonderful conversation with them. This is a lady and her partner who I knew from Facebook and Twitter, and so many other people were there. There's a very sweet lady who we gave a lift home, an old lady, and people there were just really, really nice. And nobody, you can't see it, but nobody walked out. No one left before the end. I managed to hold the audience the whole time, and there was a great Q&A, as you heard. And I've had a 5th time. I've had a wonderful experience of speaking at SUFON, and I hope there'll be 6th, 7th, and 8th, and more. And so I'm going to have a good night's sleep now, and in the morning I've got breakfast, which is nice, and then my journey home to Oxford. Good morning. It's Friday morning. I've just had the mother of all sleeps. I must have really needed it, even though I slept for a couple of hours in the afternoon as well. And now it's breakfast time. So I've never had a Premier Inn breakfast before, but as you'll be finding out in a few weeks, I will hopefully be having one again. Now, I didn't want to film in the breakfast room in the lounge. It's like a Beefeater bar that's attached to the Beefeater restaurant that is attached to the hotel. It's obviously they've got a contract with them, but basically I didn't want to film in there. There's too many people, but you have like a buffet there. It's very nice, and you can have, and there's croissants and all kinds of things to put on the croissants and butter and things. It's very nice. It's an evening meal, but yeah, it'd be nice to have breakfast like that every day. But as Alan Partridge said, if I do that, I'll be dead. But it's nice to have a treat when you're away. So I appreciate SUFON for arranging that for me as well. That's very good of them. Right, souvenirs time. I know for some of you this is the best part of the video. Let's see what we've got here. That bag has got all my chargers in. It's there's it's my laptop charger, phone charger, and my, I can't open it now with one hand, but it's got my camera charger in as well. That's my notebook, toothbrush, a pen. Now this is a book. And I remember picking this up. What was it? I can't remember. It was a couple of days ago. A book to read. Oh, it's Kim Philby, My Silent War. It's quite good. I've been into spy stories and things like that lately. And what's Nexus magazine? I've read that one. This is one I'm reading at the moment. That's the one before the current one. And then here is the current one, which I haven't read yet. It's in that envelope. So those are my souvenirs. It's a beautiful morning here in Swansea. It's actually quite chilly, even though it's sunny. I was going to wait for Emily to pick me up. I forgot to mention last night, I sold all my books. I only bought 8 of them here. Believe it or not, there's just 8 books in that bag. I have to wrap them up like this. You see, you've got to wrap them up in this sort of thing, with plastic bags in there. If you don't have a car and you're like have to carry things like books, things you want to keep in good condition, it's actually pretty difficult. You've got to wrap them up very carefully if you have to carry them around in a bag, because they very easily get knocked about and damaged and creased. So that's what I did. But anyway, I'm coming home with none of them, although someone did give me a present, which is nice, which is in that bag. So yeah, that's very nice of them. And one of the people who attended gave me a bottle of Welsh mead and some cheese, Caerphilly cheese, or something similar, and some biscuits, and it was very nice. That's really good of them. So just going to wait for Emily to pick me up now and take me to the station. So it's quite a nice place to wait. He should be here pretty shortly. Now there's the train that I'm going to go back on pretty soon. It's arrived, it's sitting at the station. I don't think it's going anywhere just yet. I'm a bit early. I'll see if I can get on board. I just thought I'd have a look at show you the sights here of Swansea. Abertawe, the bilingual signs here, as you can see there. Long time since well, it's not long actually, but I was just thinking about it the first time, one time I came here when I was a little kid. Went to see Star Wars when it first came in the cinema. It was the only place we could go where it was showing, because the local cinema at Aberystwyth was an absolute flea pit. So my mum and dad took me here to Swansea to watch it, and we couldn't get in. We got to the end of we were in the queue, and then someone came out and said, "Sorry, we're full up." I cried my eyes out. We went down to the beach and had a good time. I won't tell you how old I was, but then I came back here in September, and it was Gareth's funeral, and I stayed overnight at the Travelodge, and I met Gareth's family, and it was like something. It was sad, but it was a sort of celebration of his life. Gareth Davis, he was one of these kind of like, well, it was a train coming. Oh, I'm a train spotter now. One of these workhorses, one of these kinds of. He was one of these. What's the word? How do I put it? Dedicated central figures in all of this. And as you know, I did the Mindset podcast as often as I could. I think all in all I was on 151 programs of the Mindset podcast. And I have uploaded all the ones which I'm in. I have uploaded to archive.org, and I'm making little videos of them as well, bit by bit, which I only do a little bit at a time. If I had more sort of focus, I'd got them done by now. I've done about 50 of those, and someone else has gathered all the other. Someone luckily has an archive of all of them. I mean, it's always worth downloading these things, and when it's only when someone dies that you realise how precious they are. And I mean, I've done the same with Kev Baker's stuff. I've downloaded as much of Kev Baker's stuff as I can. It's And then, of course, Sam Wright died last week. He's pretty old, and you know, he was on the cards. He's been sick since Christmas, you know. But it just feels like there's been a run of bereavements, a series of them over the last less than a year now, about 10 months. I count 5 people who I've known, who I've been close to, who have gone. You've seen the videos I've made. Ian R. Crane, Gareth Davis, there's Shirley Bolstock, Sam, Kev Baker. I hope that's the end of it now, I really do. But is it a bit like that scene in Lord of the Rings? It's actually, you don't actually see it in the feature cut. You have to get the extended edition. But there's a scene where Sam and Frodo are in the woods one night, and they see the wood elves walking past, singing. And they're leaving Middle Earth. This is just before the War of the Ring, and it is like they're saying, it's almost like a statement that they're leaving Middle Earth to the humans, and it is rather like it feels a bit like that now. All these souls are departing this realm and leaving it to the rest of us. It's an interesting thought, but also a sad one. I mean, being back here on this station after all these months, 6 months now since Gareth died, just makes me think of that. You know, it just makes me think in those terms. Time to go home, I think. We're off, heading home now. As you can see, my seat is available, number 29 and 30. I tend to sit near the back of the train. It always seems to be more comfortable in that sense. There's less noise. Although these trains have like engines underneath, so it's not like there's a locomotive separate. But I've just been talking about this with somebody, and I never book seats on a train. I mean, I was speaking to someone who's a railway conductor, and they said that on every journey where the train is crowded at least 3 times on every journey, people get on, they booked a seat, they get on, someone's sitting there and they refuse to move. It happens all the time, and they just say, I'm not moving, and the conductor there has to come along and turf the person out of the seat, and sometimes even then they sometimes refuse to move, and they've had to refund the people their money for the booked seat. I know someone who went to Japan and said, that never happens in Japan. People are polite in Japan.
Welcome aboard this Great Western Railway service to
I hate these robot voices. That's another reason not to use the train, on top of everything else. Trains seem to bring out the worst in people. I'm just listening to the announcement.
Bristol Parkway, Swindon, Reading, and London Paddington.
There's something I don't get as well. My itinerary says I've got to change at Swindon and get on another train,
Station is Meath.
and then go to Didcot and change again for Oxford. Why?
This is a security message. If you see something
On the way here, I just changed once at Reading. Why have I got to change twice on the way back?
British Transport Police on 615.
I've got a good mind just to sit here until we get to Reading.
We'll sort it.
See it, say it, sort it. I don't know, Macy's making things up. Anyway, so I don't know why I can't just change at Reading on the way back. I might just sit on and go to Reading and see what happens. I don't know. Will alarms go off if I don't change at Swindon? Will there be suddenly? Will the train be bundled by security guards to drag me off if I don't change at Swindon? We'll see. I'm back at Reading Station, as you can see. I don't really know why there's a difference between going this way or going by Swindon and Didcot, except there's only one change instead of 2. Funnily enough, the guy who checked my ticket, he said the same thing. He said, "Oh, are you changing at Reading or Swindon?" I said Reading, and he shrugged his shoulders and says, "All right." So obviously the sky would not fall if I changed at Reading, which, even though it looks like something from Brave New World, is preferable to Swindon and Didcot. I mean, Swindon is actually, I'm just checking the old, I think it's 1305. Where is it? Platform 5. I can't see it here. It stops at 1301 and goes on to 1252. Why is that? Anyway, 1301, 1249. Oh, all right. I'm going to go to see Oxford on now. Oh yeah, 1249. That's now. Oh, I'm not going to catch that now, am I? All right, that's the point. I think it's 1305, platform 5. It said online, so I'm going to go there. So where is platform 5? Platform 11. Platform 12. Must be this way. Anyway, what's so good about bloody Swindon? What's so good about Swindon and Didcot? Well, Didcot, as you know, if you've seen previous videos, quite a long time ago now, has a very bad atmosphere. It has a dark energy. The staff on the station are quite rude. Swindon is a pavement. It's a platform very narrow. It has very narrow platforms, and there's not much to do there. Nowhere to sit. Even though you might meet old Carl Benjamin, Sargon of Akkad. Well, I'm sure I can have a very good, interesting conversation with him, but that's not a reason why I'd want to go to Swindon, specifically. So, I changed to Reading. Anyway, that's enough of that interesting little drama. I'm going to head to the platform I think I'm supposed to be going to. I bet everyone thinks I'm a train spotter. I'm on Reading Station. It's a wet, cold day. It's not raining right now, but it obviously has been, judging by the ground. It's a lot colder than it looks like, actually, even though it's now March. It is actually it's colder than it was last week, certainly. I've got got one more stage of my journey to do, but it's not platform 5 and it's not 5 past. It's platform 9, and it is 18 minutes past to go. So that's a change from what was advertised online. One thing I haven't talked too much about is like COVID restrictions. As you know, Drakeford Longshanks and the Senedd in Wales have been absolutely rabid and rampant when it comes to COVID restrictions. They love the power it gives them. And so Drakeford, when he's not arranging curfews for white males, has gone full hell bent for leather to try and keep the COVID narrative going for as long as he possibly can. He wants to milk it for every drop he can get. As a result, they've only just released the major restrictions on the 28th, which was just a few days ago, 20th of February 2022. Well, you may have heard on the announcements, it may have occurred on some of the times that you heard the announcements. They're still saying on the announcements that you have to wear your mask on public transport. Although according to the .gov website, you don't have to anymore and haven't had to since the 28th. So obviously one part doesn't know what the other part's doing. As always with these COVID restrictions, you know, they're so confusing that no one even really knows what they all are at the same time. But I was pleased to say in Wales, very few people, for example, on the station or on the trains, very few people were actually wearing masks. Probably less than a third, I would say, were wearing masks, which is good. It's about the same as what it is in England. So where the message has got through, it has registered that those restrictions are no longer in place. So that's something anyway. I was talking to a lady actually on the way to Cardiff. She says, oh, I never put one on. I'm only going to Cardiff and I never put a mask on. It says you've got to, but you know, I just didn't even think about it. So I thought, good for her. Well done. No, thank you for I told her what my channel was instantly, so you know who you are. I hope you're enjoying the video if you're watching. So now I've got another 18 minutes to wait. It's just over, and I'll be able to go home, and that'll be it for this little adventure. I'm on the train from Reading to Oxford, and I forgot to show you these during the souvenir section. This is my present. Strawberries crackers. Looks very nice, don't they? Strawberries waffles, chocolate. Green Thunder, Snowdonian cheese. And this here, White Valley mead drinks. Mead, sparkling mead. Honey and rhubarb flavour. And this is the book. You may have heard of this, The David Enigma. Flying objects from West Wales. That was a present from someone who was at the meeting. It's great, isn't it? And now I've just got a short leg. 25 minutes and I'll be in Oxford. I'm back in Oxford now. It's about 1:45, quite early. And that's the last time ever I go to Swansea by train. Next time, I mean, obviously for something like Gareth's funeral, it would have involved a 3-day trip because that was like midday. But I'll get the coach, I don't care. I've just spent almost £100 on this journey and it's too much, and I'm not going to whinge about that again. There's very little to whinge about, actually. I've had a lovely time. I was given a lovely present by some people, and everyone there was really appreciative. Nobody walked out. I mean, it was quite a long talk, but they stayed there till the entire end. Emlyn and Steve and all the others who run the group were wonderful. Great to see. I've met some old friends I've not seen for ages. Johnny Enigma, great to see you. Jules, and several new friends, Araminta on Twitter, and other people as well. Thank you very much, all of you. And I met some new people. I met Araminta's partner. I met an old lady, a lovely old lady who was very sweet, and a couple of other people who came along. And I loved doing the speech. It was very, very good. I came here with 8 books. I've come home with none. So sold every single one. And so, all in all, sold them 92 quid. I've had a wonderful time. So time to be more positive, I think. Yeah, that was a Swansea UFO Network. I really do recommend it. I hope I'll be going back there soon. If ever you're in a position to go to Swansea and go to one of their meetings, please do. Even if I'm not speaking there, they're still good. So there'll be another video coming very, very soon. Don't forget, watch Wag the Dog, because we're doing the watch party pretty soon after this video is uploaded. Thank you for watching Hapanwo TV. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order.